Hello, and welcome again to the Unidentified Celebrity Review. We have an interesting show coming up, one that might challenge some of my beliefs, as well as some of yours. Personally, I look forward to having my beliefs change. It means I've learned new information powerful enough to change my way of thinking. If you want to have productive discussions, I think it's important to be open to such a change of thought. I actually don't want to believe. I want to know. And until I do, my beliefs may change. I encourage you all to keep an open mind as well. If you close off paths of investigation, you might never find the unexpected result at the end. For example, many believers shy away from skeptical talk about cutting-edge military technology. And while they might be right that such technology can't explain all UFO sightings, especially those from decades ago, they might miss making other connections that might explain the renewed governmental interest in UFOs. This new tech might be finding old UFOs. I'll be digging into that topic on my channel, Rather Be Squidding, so make sure you're subscribed over there. But now, let's dive into the discussion. Please welcome our co-hosts, Luis Jimenez and UFO James.
Hello. Hey guys, how we doing?
Doing well.
I'm ready to be brought down to reality.
Yeah,
today, I think.
Yeah, no, that's wow. Okay, that's a pretty good segue to the show because that's exactly how I feel too. I mean, this is gonna be a fun exercise for us. So before we get started, hello, good morning, good evening, good day, good afternoon, and aloha. I forgot to play our Patreon commercial, but you guys know. Welcome back to the Unidentified Celebrity Review, your home for credible news, reviews, and commentary on everything UAP, UFO, emerging tech, science, and futurism. My name is Luis Jimenez, Rather Be Squidding, UFO Jane. We're here for you on a Wednesday afternoon. Welcome. If you haven't already, like, subscribe, share the channel, especially if you love the show. We've got ways to support other than doing that. You can join our Patreon for at least starting at $1 a month, going all the way up to crazy amounts if you've got the guts. We've got the super chats that are open. We are a public access channel, so if you want to support through that way, we run on donations provided by you guys. So thank you so very damn much. Also want to say thank you to DOS Tapes. They provide all of the tunes that you hear on the show. Their Bandcamp link is in the description below. We've got the show that's available on the podcast, on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you find your podcasts, pretty shortly after the show. So check that out. Leave us a rate and review. And what else? What else do we got? I think that's
fun show today. Yeah.
A fun show. We've got a fun show coming up for you guys today. A lot of news happening, especially on the political UAP front, which is, my jam. So we're going to try and get into that to the last half hour of the show. So that'll be a lot of fun because a lot of stuff did happen. So stick around. We're definitely going to try and break it down for you as best we can. Today's guest is, I guess, a controversial one. I first heard of James Carrion, I'll be honest with everybody, was that Showtime documentary, UFO. And he was my favorite part. He was my favorite part because he challenged my belief system real quick. And I like when that happens. And sometimes, though, I also hate when that happens. It's like a gut punch, right? Where you're like, oh my God. And what I'm looking at is, am I just completely wrong? And he made me question that, and I enjoy it. Of course, like we do on this show, we try not to have, a bias or a belief system. We try to challenge it all the time. Unfortunately for me, and we'll get into this with James, I've had my experience when I was 13 years old, so it's just hard for me to just fight. And constantly fighting the belief system off, trying to be as level-headed about the topic as we can. So I am so happy to talk to this guy, Mr. James Carrion, who's a former International Director of MUFON from 2006 to 2010, and negotiated the MUFON-BAASS contract that was later revealed to be part of AWSAAP. James has had an interest in UFOs since the age of 11 and believes that there is life in the universe Whether or not intelligent life has visited Earth is an open question that James is still seeking to irrefutable evidence of. So without further ado, Mr. James Carrion. How you doing, sir?
Good. How are you guys doing? Thanks for having me on the show.
Hey, man, it's an absolute pleasure. Like I was telling these guys, you were my favorite part of the Showtime doc. I especially when I had learned that, oh my God, this guy ran MUFON. And it seems like the process that you put MUFON through was incredibly rigorous. So, you know, from that aspect, I was like, oh, God, I got to talk to this guy. Just absolutely have to talk to this man. Gosh, where do we start? James, in your bio, it says that you've had an interest in this since the age of 11. I am curious, have you ever had a personal experience? Because I wanted to preface our conversation with, I've had a personal experience, but I try with every ounce of my being not to put that personal experience on anybody else or expect them to believe it or even understand it, because it's a wild thing to talk about. But I am curious, like, have you ever had a personal experience?
You know, honestly, I've never had anything strange. I've never seen a UFO, never seen a ghost, nothing paranormal.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I've had an interest in this field forever. And, you know, especially when you're in MUFON, I came across so many folks who had personal experiences and had stories to tell. And that's always really piqued my interest. Actually, what piqued my interest more than just those stories was the fact that UFOs were still a topic. I mean, you know, when I found out about MUFON and that there were folks with credentials, you know, PhDs, folks with master's degrees that were affiliated with this organization, and they were having these symposiums annually, that really intrigued me, because I'm thinking, you know what, are UFOs real? Is this just science fiction? I mean, we don't have leprechaun conventions, do we? We don't have symposiums on fairies, but we do on UFOs. So there's got to be something to this. And that's what really, really got me involved.
Well, we do have symposiums with furries. That's pretty close.
Well, that's true, yeah. And
by the way, John Greenwald from the Black Vault says, send my hello to James Carrion. I've known him a long time. Thank you, John, for watching. Thank you for being here. Yeah, we're going to have John on next Monday, so stick around for that. Awesome. But that's cool. I didn't know that you guys knew each other. So that's interesting that you were happened to be in the same documentary. That must have been fun. Or did you even get to see him? Because it looks like you guys shot separate locations.
Yeah, I haven't seen John since 2009, I think, when we were both at my last symposium at MUFON. He was there.
Right on. Okay, so no personal experience. So tell me, let's, I guess, start with the MUFON years, because that's when I guess you really started sort of putting pencil to paper and really looking at this in a serious way. So what were the biggest changes in that MUFON investigators handbook that you made to sort of legitimize how these things are being investigated?
Yeah, so I think if we look back at the MUFON years, the two major projects I was involved in, the first one was called the Pandora Project. And that's where we took all of MUFON's paper files that had been accumulated up to that point. So, you know, we're talking, MUFON was founded in '69. So when I became part of the organization, which was around 98 or so, and I would volunteer down at their headquarters in Denver, where all their paper files were at, and had a conversation with John Schuessler, who was the director at the time. I said, hey, John, we have to do something with these files. We can't just leave them here. You know, we have to digitize them, make them searchable, put them out there so anybody can search through the data. And so the board agreed, and we went through a major effort of digitizing all of the paper files up to that point. So that was the Pandora Project. The second part was when I took over as international director, I decided to rewrite the investigative handbook. So they have a investigator handbook that teaches you A through Z how to investigate a UFO. So I wanted to make that more scientific, more rigorous. And so I did the rewrite of their manual. And actually a third part to that, we actually created what was called the Strike Team for Area Research, the STAR team, which was a rapid response force. So if there was a major UFO event, we wanted to get boots on the ground as quickly as possible. And it was the STAR team that actually got involved with the whole Bigelow-BAASS program back in 2009.
just out of curiosity, and this is not like a gotcha question or anything like that, but what is your science background? What makes you qualified to make it more scientifically rigorous, or did you sort of lean on other handbooks and other examples that you could sort of look at and implement into a MUFON version of it?
Yes, I don't have a scientific background per se. I have a bachelor's degree in Russian language, and my master's is in international affairs. But we had already a good number of folks that were affiliated as consultants from MUFON that I could draw upon. So when I was rewriting the manual, if I had, wanted to know how would we actually do a proper radiological survey, and I could reach out to a MUFON consultant who would provide the data for that. So it was really just reaching out and using the resources we had at hand and bring those together to put more science into that investigative manual.
Okay. Guys, go for it. You have any questions?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess, when we talk about investigative handbook and going out and investigating a UFO event kind of after the fact, do you think that you could actually prove that something happened, visiting it after the fact? Or do you think we might need something like the Galileo project that's actively looking at the time?
Well, and that is, sure, it's a good question. So that is the problem, right? Is because you are getting there after the event has already occurred. So what can you investigate? Well, any physical evidence, any effects on people or animals. You can investigate whether the weather that was happening at the time. So you're really sort of gathering data after the fact. Nobody's there to actively see it unless you have video evidence, of course. Then you have something to review.
So I'm curious. So you have a good reputation, I think, of being skeptical about, I guess, some of the UFO narrative, quote unquote, that's been out there. Have you always felt that way, or what was your head like in these early MUFON days? Were you ready to just any minute now I'm going to see a photo of a gray alien, or how was your mindset when you were doing these early investigations?
Yeah, it was a good question, because actually when I first joined the organization, I was at the point where I'm thinking, okay, there must be something to this, because again, so many people are involved in this and there are so many stories, good stories. But it wasn't actually until I became director that I sort of opened my eyes to a part of the field that was very dark. And when I mean dark, I mean human deception. So there were folks that were involving themselves in the field for no other reason than to muddy the waters. So, so then it became very difficult to try to think, all right, how are we going to push UFO investigation forward when we have all of these, I'll call them external forces, that are applying pressure to push the narrative in a certain direction that they want it to go. And I have so many different encounters with folks that just have, questionable motives. And, just doing investigations where somebody put a whole hell of a lot of effort to muddy the water and to deceive and to create new UFO mythology. So that's when my skeptical side really started coming out. But I think folks need to distinguish what a skeptic is from what a debunker is.
Right.
There really are two different things. So if you look at the spectrum of belief, right, we have on one end what I would consider the true believer, and on the other end, what I'd call the true debunker, right? And so they're at opposite ends of the spectrum, but they're actually their mindset is the same, right? Because their minds are already made up. The believer thinks this is alien, this is something paranormal, nothing's going to convince me otherwise. And the debunkers on the other end saying it can't possibly be alien, UFOs can't possibly be real. And neither of them actually look at the data close enough to try to figure out what's true and what's not. So if you are a skeptic, really you should be in the middle, right? You should be thinking, okay, I'll have an open mind. I'll look at the data. If the data pans out, great. But I can't let my bias on the belief side or on the debunking side keep me from, just really focusing on the data, because really that's what it's all about, right? Everything else, stories, anecdotes, belief can muddy the data in a way that it becomes unusable.
So,
go ahead.
Well, so you said there were darker deceptive elements when you were at MUFON in the early days. So are you saying the deception was from, witnesses who are overzealous, maybe like you're saying, and just believing in things, or was there something else going on in those early days? Or who is that coming from? Was it the witnesses or other people you were encountering or other MUFON heads? Or
Well, it's a
can you
mixture.
say?
Sure, it's a mixture of various folks with various motivations. Yes, I've come across folks who've claimed extraordinary things that were in fact not being truthful. But the majority, I would say the majority of UFO witnesses are really just, they're really intrigued about what they saw. They're not lying about it. They just saw something they believed to be extraordinary. When I talk about the dark deceptive forces, I'm really referring to things like, I'll give you a classic example. In 2006, some dive company came forward and they claimed that they had found in one of the Great Lakes a UFO. And they showed side scan, they showed sonar data of this UFO. And it's actually related to an old case from 1953 where this jet disappeared over the lake and crashed. And there was some speculation that it collided with a UFO. So this dive company came out and they claimed that they had found it. They had found the crashed jet and they found the UFO next to it. And of course, the UFO community just went wild over this. And everybody believed the claims, but nobody bothered to actually do a thorough investigation. So as I started looking more into this personally, I came to find out this dive company did not exist. None of the folks that were related to it existed. And it was just all one big story that was made up to recycle or to regurgitate some of the UFO stories that were out there. Now, I don't know what happened in 1953, whether that was real or not, but I do know that in 2006, whoever came out with that story was pushing a false narrative. And for what reason, right? Was there a money angle? No. Who was behind it? We don't know. They're completely anonymous. And that was just one of many cases where I started to see this pattern of folks trying to create new myth in the UFO field, sometimes by current events, sometimes by trying to recycle older events.
Go ahead, rather.
Well, I guess, when you focus on all this data and you talk about the diagram between a true debunker and a true believer, has the data swayed you in either direction, or are you still kind of right there in the middle?
I'm still right there in the middle, just because there's good data, that really makes you go, wow, there's something there. And I think probably if you look at the whole spectrum of activity that's associated with UFOs, I would probably think on the abduction side of things, that's where I've seen more interesting data.
Really?
And there are other data sets that I would consider more interesting. But the data has to be analyzed. I'll give you a classic example of this. So MUFON had this project called the Ambient Monitoring Project, also known as AMP. That was the acronym. And what they did is they recruited these folks that were supposedly having abduction experiences. And they gave each of these individuals this box, it was about this big. And what was crammed into that box was a bunch of scientific instrumentation that was collecting data 24 hours a day. And it was disguised to make it look like a book or to make it look just like a normal box you would have in your home. And they told these volunteers that were claiming abductions, put this in some corner of your house, just let it record data every day. And when you feel like you've had an abduction experience, journal about it. And so the thought was, we collect this data continuously, we collect the journals, and then we try to correlate the times when these folks were claiming abductions to something strange happening within their ambient environment. So, from my perspective, that was a very good scientific study. And so the boxes were made, and it was expensive. We had a donor that helped with that, and data was collected. The problem was the data was never analyzed. Here we have what could possibly be very significant data to prove something that all of a sudden this experiment just petered out and nobody bothered to analyze the data.
So why?
Yeah, why?
I want to hear that data so bad.
Exactly. So I inherited this. This is something I found out after I became director. And so I was like, I'm thinking, there's no way. We have to analyze this data. So we actually found this gentleman, this statistician who would look at the data for us. And unfortunately, he took the data and said he was working on it, but never ended up working on it. So he never analyzed it. And by that time, I'd left the organization. So the data is still there at MUFON, waiting to be analyzed.
Did you think these are, systemic, bureaucracy kind of problems at MUFON, or do you think that there's other insidious, nefarious forces at play here that are stopping proper analysis of this stuff?
It's hard to say. I can't say it's all nefarious, but it's disappointing. That's for sure, because that's true science, and that's what we would like to see happen.
Out of curiosity, how long was the experiment? How long did you guys run the experiment for?
I do not remember the time frame. I want to say it's about a year, but I'm not sure. I'd have to go back.
Wow. So let's just cut it in half. Say 6 months of actual data that can be, that's got correlation. I'm sorry was it just one subject or was it multiple?
Multiple subjects.
Wow.
Yeah, they had multiple devices that were installed.
Wow.
So that's very interesting stuff. Something else that MUFON did, which I actually find intriguing, and I think a lot of folks, if they could see the data, would find intriguing also, is they ran this other project called the Abduction Transcription Project. And what they did is they had a relationship with all of these therapists, psychotherapists, who a lot of their clients were claiming abductions. And what we did is we actually got them to record all of the hypnosis sessions with these clients. And then we transcribed those hypnosis sessions, but leaving the witness information out. So, and there's tons of this information. So there's like hypnosis session after hypnosis session of folks talking about their abduction experiences. And so, the thought is get all this data, correlate it, see if there's something that these folks are recounting in common. What are the common themes? What are the common things they're experiencing? And again, a data set that was not analyzed.
Yeah, it seems almost unbelievable. Conspiracy theorist me kind of thinks that maybe they found they did not find anything and didn't want to admit that. Is there any possibility of that?
I don't know, because again, these were things I inherited from before, and actually I still have the data set with me. So I have all the transcripts, and at times I'm thinking, I'm just going to throw them online on a website. Let anybody have access to them, because you can't really tell who the witness is. Let somebody sit there and analyze it, and I may still do that.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Open source it seems like the way to go these days, because I feel like people actually sift through it very, very well, and it's free. I mean, the only issue with it is that it doesn't have an accreditation with it, so you can't take it and put it on CNN, for example, and go, look, we've had some significant proof here, because then people are gonna be like, well, who studied it? We open sourced it. It was Ted, and Albuquerque. But wow. So what kind of caught me by surprise here, James, is that you said when it comes to you're in the middle, but the evidence that you really sort of lean toward is on the abduction side of things. So I'm curious to know what you think of, and it kind of leads to this question here a little bit about the videos and the New York Times article and all those things that happened in 2017, sort of leading up into what's going on today. But please ask James to give a full rundown of his theory that recent UFO news is a PSYOP, including Elizondo, Mellon, Knapp, etc. PSYOP for 80 years. Do you think this is a whole big PSYOP?
Honestly, from Skinwalker to AWSAAP to what's happening now, I think it's part of some operation. I can't tell you what the goals of the operation are, why it's happening the way it is, but just the way it's happening, and actually the way it started and originated, tells me that there's an operation going on. So, you have to think back. A lot of folks want to think that what's going on right now with the Department of Defense and all this interest in UFOs just sort of sprang up organically. No, it didn't. You have to trace it all the way back to 2008, 2009, when, Lukatsky, the guy from the DIA, went out to the Skinwalker Ranch, allegedly had a paranormal experience, went off to Congress, talked to a couple of folks in Congress, who then appropriated $22 million for a study. The origin of that, in itself is questionable. And this is why I think Skinwalker is such an important part of this, because I know a lot of folks want to believe Skinwalker is real, but there are a lot of red flags and unanswered questions that need to be answered before folks can accept Skinwalker as a paranormal reality.
Well, are those answers more from the co-owner of the ranch, or those issues that you have with it also sit with the current owner of the ranch?
Well, I don't know Brandon Fugel's motivations for buying this ranch or having this TV show or doing things the way he's doing. I can tell you two things. One is that he's not being truthful about the pre-Sherman family activity on the ranch. That is a given, because he is promoting something that's not true. He's saying that this ranch had UFO activity and strange activity going back decades. No, it did not. That activity started in 1994 when the Sherman family moved on the ranch. But he's trying to promote that as though it is real activity. It's not. What's happening now, or actually what happened from 1994 onwards, I don't want to comment on that, because we have Bigelow involved, we have an intelligence agency involved. So who knows what happened in 94, who knows what's happening now. We have folks that had 1 foot in the UFO field and 1 foot in the intelligence agencies. Classic is, Colonel John Alexander, who was, working on behalf of doing non-lethal weaponry. So who knows what the ranch was used for? I mean, there's all kinds of things happening there. But I do know that it's questionable that we can trace all of the Elizondo, Mellon, Knapp, all the way back to that time, where there's still things that have not been answered, and the origin of all that.
Regardless of it's maybe testing new weaponry or mind control techniques or something, would you agree that there's something weird going on at that ranch, or do you think that maybe this is all just literally made up?
I don't know. I forced myself to rewatch all 18 episodes of the Skinwalker 2 seasons, and I would have to say I'm fairly disappointed, because if their approach to me is very pseudoscientific. I think it's sort of great for TV, great for ratings. People love it. They love the mystery of all of it. But I think if you actually got together a group of scientists from various academic institutions and you told them evaluate these 18 episodes, can you call this science? They would probably say no.
Well, what's funny is we had Brandon on the show, and we reviewed every single episode of both seasons of that show on this program. I think it's fair to say, kind of agree with you on most of that. But when we had Brandon on, he gave us a perspective that obviously only he can give us, because he owns the ranch. And the perspective was, well, because of that show, the world has access to a ranch that has never had that much access to it ever in the history of the ranch. People say weird stuff's going on. Hey, put a TV show on the ranch and do it. I mean, at least it's not the same as Bob Bigelow, where all of the data has been hidden. None of us will probably ever get to see it. There's so much ambiguity with where that money went. It's tough for me to really put a pinpoint on it. But the thing that kind of, and from that perspective, I was like, well, okay, that's fair. Like, you are giving us access. I would like to see more data and have it open sourced on his website. That was sort of one of my complaints. And he said he's working on it, so I got to give him some credit there, that he is giving people access to it. And that's why I kind of wanted you to talk to TJ, because I mean, it was tough for him to convince this guy to do this show. Because for me, you're a billionaire. Your whole money making venture is that you buy and sell property. That's what he does. He's a real estate magnate, and so he didn't buy this property to put a Starbucks on it or an office building. He bought this property because he's genuinely interested in it. And who knows what other motivations could be behind that. But I see his perspective when he says, well, nobody has access to it. Nobody gets to see the ranch. And I'm like, nah, I mean, you've got 18 episodes of seeing the ranch, That's access, whether we like the access or not. I can't really blame him because he doesn't edit the show. He doesn't produce the show. He doesn't direct any episodes or write any of the dialogue that I'm sure is in some cases written for that show. So from that perspective, I can't really put that on him because those decisions aren't his. And I don't think he's making money off the show. Like, we've looked at it and we're looking at the number. It's not History Channel's biggest show. And I'm sure the contracts of those people on the ranch go up a little bit, but like, he's not getting network television money for that show. Like, it, you know what I mean? Like, so those are sort of the things where I'm like, okay, I could kind of see where Brandon Fugel's point of view is coming from, but I could also see what you're saying. Like, it's not real science. Like, it needs to be better. I think it would be cool if they had a whole season where they ran one experiment and then did other experiments around that one experiment to see what they can conjure up. There's all sorts of other stuff they could do to make it more scientific. I agree with you. And I think still make it entertaining. I don't know if there's a real question in there, but I feel what you're saying, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. So, all right. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So, for example, let's take was it Thomas Winterton, the individual on the show who had a brain injury. Is there anything wrong with releasing medical records?
It depends on who you are. Maybe you're not comfortable with releasing your medical records.
But he's already publicly stating what the injury is.
That's fair. That's fair. Well, look, me personally, if I own that ranch, I would take him off of it because clearly it's an endangerment to the ranch. He can maybe turn around and sue me if he secures property or maintains property. That seems to be his job title, is he maintains the ranch. Just put him on another one of your properties, so that way you don't have to risk him getting hurt or maybe dying.
But my point is,
I see your point.
My point is, Luis, is that the data is not there for us to examine, right? So we're taking their word that there was an injury. They show some sort of CT scan, and it's supposed to satisfy us. Well, it doesn't satisfy me. Second example would be when Dr. Travis Taylor allegedly got a dose of ionizing radiation. Where are the medical records that state that? I can make that claim too. I got hit by some ionizing radiation, but it doesn't make it true. So that's what I mean by when you're collecting data. And if you want your data to be believed, it has to be peer reviewed. Somebody else has to look at it, put their eyes on it. It would be the same thing, for example, with this ambient monitoring project. If MUFON had analyzed the data, as they should have, and then came out with some sort of report and publicly put it out there, they could also publish the data with it. So some other statistician, some other scientist could then crunch the numbers and see if they come to the same conclusions or not. So you can't just say something's true and, well, for some people that's fine, right? They're okay with believing that. But when it comes to science just doesn't take your word for it, right? They actually want to see data.
So what is your feeling on the Galileo project? And I don't know if you've heard of UAPX, but some of these newer ventures that are claiming to do what we all want, right? Which is find the data and be transparent about it. I know Galileo project was recently included in that amendment. So do you worry that those efforts are part of this operation and that it's just going to be the same dog and pony show, or do you have some hope that we'll get somewhere?
I always have hope, but I'm not sure. I don't know enough about their approach, so I'm not going to say one way or another whether it's the right approach. If it is science-based and there are actual scientists involved in it, then more power to them. I think that's great. And I'm not going to say it's part of some op. I don't know, what's behind the Galileo project, so I have really no reason to criticize it. So if it's truly science-based and they actually publicize their data and anybody can see their data, then it's kind of like open source. It's kind of like, think about open source code, right? How do you know that code that you're running in your computer that's open source is not full of viruses? Because it's out there, it's published. Anybody can look through it to know whether the programming is good or not. It's the same thing with the UFO data. So if the Galileo project takes this open source approach where they're going to publicize their data for anybody to analyze, then great. I think that is the right approach.
I think that's what Avi Loeb has promised us anyway. He said he's going to open source the data. But it does. I mean, here's the thing. I mean, sometimes those data collection things run into problems, kind of like what kind of like the problems you had with your. I mean, you're sitting on a ton of data. You said maybe up to a year. You know, like open source it. It's been, might as well. I mean, at this point, might as well release the data. You know, so sometimes I feel like sitting on data is. I mean, like, you know what I'm saying? Like sometimes those are just the circumstances in which that happens, where you end up sitting on data for a long time and you don't release it. So, I mean, to kind of criticize other people for doing that, it happens. No, I mean, is that fair?
Sure. Well, let's talk about the two data sets I do have. Actually, I have three data sets. One is the ambient monitoring project, which I believe I still have the collected data, but I don't have the journals that you need to correlate the activity. So unless MUFON were to release those, that data set can't even be analyzed. You need both parts. The abduction transcription data, absolutely. I could release that tomorrow, and I'd be happy to. In fact, maybe I'll just ask John Greenwald if he's listening. Hey, do you have a place on your site out there that you want to, park this data? I'll send you the CD. They're on CD right now, on DVDs. I'll send them to you. Just go ahead and do it. The third data set I have the Pandora project, which are all the MUFON files that were from 1969 to roughly around 2010 that were paper-based, and those have been digitized. The problem with that data set, though, is that there is witness information in there, right? There are phone numbers, there are addresses. So there's identified information that somebody's going to have to painstakingly go through and censor out because you can't just release witness data like that. But if John says, hey, send me those too, I'll go through and I'll painstakingly do that and I'll publish them, I'd be happy to do that.
I'll take all the reports from Texas. I report on UFOs here in Texas, James.
Yeah.
I would love to get my hands on this. We have a bunch of MUFON, old conference, what's the word I'm working, pamphlets and stuff. So that would be like a dream,
Sure.
dream to help you with that. I love it.
Well, hey, I think that would be good. I'm sure John Greenwald wouldn't have an issue doing that. I mean, it seems like you guys are cordial, and we love John Greenwald here. I think the more it's sometimes it's just I don't, because look, he doesn't. Nobody has to do a damn thing, right? With their property, with their information, with their data, they don't have to do it. Just like you don't have to release anything you don't want to, whether it be because you only have half the data points or things like that. But it's just. I feel like we get into this point where sometimes we're, and I'm guilty of this as well, where sometimes we criticize things and we're kind of doing the same thing in a way. But yeah, I mean, dude, that would be awesome. Like that would be fantastic. And I think that would go a long way into having more open dialogue like this and sort of thinking about these from different perspectives.
Sure. But sometimes you have to know whether you can trust the data too. Okay.
Right.
I'll give you a classic example of that. When I ran, I think it was the very first MUFON symposium in 2006, maybe 2007. We had a gentleman approach us that said, hey, I have a really interesting story to tell you guys. And so, and he did. He had a very, very compelling case that he presented, and he was actually at MUFON speaking at our symposium about this. So there's this very well-known UFO event from 1966 called the Portage County UFO event, when this UFO was seen over Portage County, Ohio, and these two sheriffs chased it in their squad car for like 80 miles or so. Very well known. But this gentleman came forward and said, hey, I was a deputy at Portage County, Ohio, not too long ago. And I was digging through the old cold case files, and I came across that case from 1966. And nobody knows this, but in that case file, there were metallic fragments that were recovered from this UFO. And I had them analyzed, and they're still radioactive. And as proof of that, he presented a report that showed that these metal fragments were analyzed, and they were radioactive. So that sounded very compelling. He got invited to the symposium. He went through that whole story and that, wrote up a symposium article for it, because you have to publish in the symposium proceedings. But I started to look into his background, and what I found out was that he was lying about half of what he said. He was a deputy there at one point, according to Portage County, Ohio, but it turns out that he had forged the radioactivity report. So this is what I'm talking about when we talk about data, tainted data, right? You have to know the data set, right? And but you also have to check on all the red flags, because a lot of what he was saying started to sound kind of weird. And when you're a good investigator, or like you're a police detective, when you get that gut feeling that something isn't right, and you're like, I'm going to check on that because that doesn't sound right. And those little red flags start popping up. I think the problem we're seeing with UFO investigation, and you'll see it reflected in a lot of these files that are historical, is that when the investigator lets their belief get in the way, they tend not to check those red flags out. Right? They tend to believe the story more than they do the data. And so they don't do the proper work, the proper background checks, the proper motivation checks, things along those lines.
Can I ask you, I know you had a question there. My bad, dude. Have you ever spoken to anybody or interacted with anybody face to face from the ranch?
From Skinwalker?
Yeah.
Recently, no, just Bigelow. Just
Bigelow. Okay. So no one from from the show or anything like that?
No, only online.
Well, the reason why I ask is because we had the dragon on like 3 or 4 times. He's probably my favorite part of the whole show. But what was cool about having him on, number one, he had the sense of humor to sort of take, like, we rated the show. We gave it a 1 through 10, and we broke it down with a science score and an entertainment score. So usually the science scores were pretty low. The entertainment scores sometimes were high to mid-range. We kept it honest, and he would stick around and make fun of himself and look at the show. But when we had questions about the show, when we had doubts about certain things that happened, he would give us a perspective from being there and what went down. And look, I'm not a human lie detector. I don't study body language, but he seems to be sincere and honest. It doesn't have an ego. He can't have an ego just based off of what we said about the show to his face. Like, it was a really, really fun, like, experiment and show to do. But like moments like that I've had, and again, we've had Brandon on the show. He helped us when it came to getting details on how to contact your local state representatives and ask them for more data and more transparency and more just serious attention when it comes to the UAP issue, because it is a national security issue on some levels, that we have these things in our sky that we can't explain, and we're picking them up on radar, and our best pilots have chased these things. So I think there's something worthy there to look at. I'm just not going to label it. I have no idea what it is, but it seems like, they were being sincere with us and trying to help our efforts and help all of these things we're trying to do. So I get your criticisms and I appreciate them. I think most of them are pretty right on. Like, there could be other things that they could do that can make the story a little more transparent. There's no doubt about that. But at the end of the day, it's not my ranch. Like, I don't own it. And but I would love to reconcile the relationship between you and Brandon, because I know you guys had a pretty contentious back and forth on Twitter. But I would I'd be interested to see you there for a whole week on the ranch, or a month even, like, to get a real science. Like, is that what you were originally asking for, access to the ranch to do a scientific experiment on it of some kind? Or at least what you could have? What was the reasons why? I'm trying to remember the original comment that you had that made me comment on yours. So I was like, oh yeah, these guys are actually pretty cool. You might get on there if you talk to them. But do you remember, James, what it was like?
I don't remember exactly what sparked it. Actually, some other topic got mixed in between. But
but were you asking for access to the ranch? I can't remember.
No. What I was saying was that I was really criticizing the science of the show. That was my major beef. Is that what I've seen so far of the show? doesn't tell me real science is going on. So that was concerning. But what really triggered the whole thing was the criticism of Dr. Frank Salisbury and Junior Hicks, what Dr. Salisbury wrote in his book, The Utah UFO Display, and his reinvestigation of the ranch when I went along with him in 2009 and went to the ranch, was denied access. But we interviewed the folks around the ranch, like the Garcias and the Winds and a number of other UFO witnesses. So that was my major beef with Brandon, was how he was portraying Dr. Frank Salisbury and Dr. Garth Myers and Junior Hicks as being not truthful. And I had a problem with that.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree with you. You know, the Skinwalker show is a reality show first, right? They're going to play up anything that can be supernatural, and they're going to play down anything that, you know, goes against that narrative. And I think we kind of have to expect that, right? It's a reality show on the History Channel. When you talk about trusting data, you know, I find it very entertaining, but I don't have a lot of trust into that. But you know, I do find it fascinating that the government AWSAAP program that kind of studied there, that seems to be the kind of impetus of this new governmental program and the new kind of transparency behind UFOs and the UAP task force and their collection of data, which I do find pretty credible, because, you know, that's coming from, you know, Air Force or, you know, Navy pilots, and it's coming from presumably sources that aren't subject to the same motivations that the, you know, History Channel will have. I wonder, do you view them differently, or do you have more trust in the UAP task force, or do you have the same concerns?
I have the same concerns. I think one question nobody's asking, and everybody really should be asking themselves, and the media should be asking these questions. The last official UFO investigation on the part of the US government was when Project Blue Book shut down. That was 1968, 69. And 68 to 2008, what happened in between that time? Did UFOs suddenly no longer fly in our atmosphere? Were they no longer of a national security concern? Was there some secret group off investigating them anyway? I mean, you see what I'm saying? It's like it went from zero interest to complete interest on the part of the government. What about that in between?
Well, I think that
he has to account for that in between, because it's been my experience that, you know, we talk a lot about, is there signal in the noise, right? With all this noise, all this stuff happening in the UFO field, is there a real phenomena? Is there a signal there? And what my experience has shown me is that a lot of times it's not the signal that is interesting, it's the noise. And so the noise here is that there's a whole period of US history where allegedly nobody was looking at the UFO, a part of government at least, nobody's looking at the UFO subject. How come nobody's accounting for that? Somebody has to first account for that, for me to really trust that what's happening now is a continuation of good faith. And we don't know that to be the case.
Well, I mean, from my perspective, if you kind of assume that most people in this are operating under good faith, you know, the government, the kind of answer would be that, you know, there are these things that we couldn't explain, and then the Cold War started to happen, and the government didn't want to admit that there's things that they're detecting and they can't explain. And presumably now that those Cold War tensions have died off and our technology has advanced, we're picking them up more often, and the government has started to, you know, been unable to hold back the truth that they have, seeing things that they can't explain, and now they're kind of having their hand forced to address it.
But that's our speculation, right? Why not just ask the question of the source?
Well, then what would be?
That's what they're saying, though.
Are they saying that? I've never seen any media article come out and investigate that period, nor have I seen anybody on behalf of government officially say we sort of looked the other way because we didn't understand it. That's not being said.
Do you think if there was more talk of the abduction phenomenon and that data, does that make you extra suspicious about that missing time period, right? So, I mean, we talk a lot on the show, as you know, we're talking about Tic Tac UFO, but ultimately the question is who or what is piloting these things, and, you know, did Roswell happen, and or what, you know, was that a deception and all that? Are you, if this is all potentially an operation, do you expect that we'll ever folks like Lou Elizondo or Christopher Mellon will ever be able to share any abduction data, or we're not talking about a craft in the sky, but more of what you were referencing earlier?
Well, I think first Elizondo has to put to bed his NDA, because it's easy for him to say, well, he sort of dribbles information out, and the problem is that when it comes to a subject he doesn't want to talk about, or he wants to make it sound more mysterious, he'll say, well, I can't talk about that, right? My NDA doesn't allow me, my clearance, my this. Come on, you're either transparent or you're not. If you guys ask me questions in the show and I haven't told you once, I can't tell you that, right? I'm going to answer, and it's going to be my honest answer. But whenever Elizondo says, well, I can't really say that, or I can't talk about that, that leads me to believe that there's something else going on, right? That nobody's going to be that altruistic. First, when you have a clearance, right? When you sign the dotted line to get your clearance, you better not breathe a word about anything you learned during the time you have that clearance, anything. And yet he's releasing information little by little. Doesn't make sense to me. I had a clearance in 1983, 1985, around there, top secret, SCI. I've never told a soul about what I did when I was in the military, or about actual secrets. I'll say, yes, I was a Russian linguist and I was stationed in Germany, but I won't talk about particulars. Yet he's releasing particulars at the same time saying I can't release these particulars. Makes no sense. Put to bed your NDA and just be transparent.
Well, have you ever?
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with you.
Go ahead, Drew. No, I mean, it's how do you even the best whistleblowers can't say everything. Like, I'm thinking of, for example, Edward Snowden. There are things that he cannot talk about now, and he won't. But he's still spilled the beans on what was going on.
But he's also sitting in Russia right now too, right? Under
fair, that's fair.
Right? He's not walking around where he's subject to prosecution here in the U.S.
True, but then again, I don't know if spying on American citizens is. I mean, it's difficult to say which one's a bigger story depending on what perspective you're looking at it from, but the idea that we've been spied on for decades, possibly, and even into today, and all of this data is being collected on us is a huge revelation in American history. And I don't know if the reason why he's probably not in Russia, and when I say he, I mean Lou, is because he hasn't gone into those sections of the NDA.
Well, I don't know, because I can understand if it was revealing sources and methods and you were going to get somebody killed in the process. But it doesn't sound like that with Elizondo. He stays away from certain areas, right? Like he'll say, well, he'll make a comment about Roswell, but when somebody asks him, about, I don't know, the actual materials that were collected, he'll say, well, I can't really reveal more about that. I mean, it's a little bit different.
Yeah, I'd say it's definitely a stretch to call Elizondo a whistleblower, right? He's still has a government contract. He's a government contractor, and he's clearly talking to people on the inside and is, coordinating with the military-industrial complex to some degree. But I think all that being said, that doesn't necessarily mean that if he's misleading us or not telling us the whole truth, that it's a nefarious or a bad thing. He could be, maybe the operation is slowly disclosing the truth to the American public and getting Congress to investigate the issue.
We could speculate that. It's all speculation, right?
Sure. Do you feel like we're going, the road that we're going on, though, has gotten us new government programs that are looking at UFOs and kind of an unprecedented, we haven't been this focused on UFOs since, you said, 69. Do you think that's a good thing, or do you still kind of riding the fence on whether this is all good or bad?
I'm not going to call it good or bad, but I do know that the government is taking away the UFO narrative from the layperson. So, MUFON has been relegated to what? Because the government's in charge now, right? The government's they're in charge. They're gathering the data. They're taking it seriously. So they've just hijacked that narrative away from the UFO community. And maybe the UFO community feels like this is a good thing, but I think in the end, we don't know, because it's been classified. It's being, it's information that we're probably, like you said, about data sets that don't get released. This is data we're probably never going to see the light. It's never going to see the light of day.
Well, I think there's a big difference though today, and that is that it's not just in the hands of the government. You've got a lot of independent groups. What do you mean?
You've got TikTok. People can post their UFO sightings on
TikTok.
TikTok.
No, for sure. But what I'm saying is, like,
kidding.
there's other entities that are looking at this topic without the permission of the government, and they're raising money to do to create those efforts and be transparent with it as well. That's going to take time. But we also have a corporate space race happening right now. So we've got a lot of corporations that are going to be going into space on a commercial level. And it's not just Lou Elizondo that's saying this. It's, the government would have a real hard time arresting or questioning or doubting the story of not only Lou Elizondo, but Christopher Mellon, Ryan Graves, David Fravor, and Alex Dietrich. And I mean, yes, these are all military people, but these are all very serious, level-headed people that don't put the UFO topic as their, topping on the Christmas tree. Like this is something that in most cases they don't even want to talk about. And just because of the information that's come out, they're sort of forced to talk about it. Not really. I mean, nobody forces them to do anything, but they're gracious enough to talk about it. And it adds real weight to this. There's a totality to this. It's not just Lou Elizondo. And I think it's kind of unfair, I think, a little bit to put it all on him. Well, because he didn't answer a question specifically about one certain thing. What if he's saving it for a book?
Well,
and is that so wrong? Like, is that so wrong in this day and age to have a book and to save things I don't know, maybe you can make some money with all of this time that you've been giving. I mean, he's been on this show multiple times. He doesn't have to do small little shows like this. He doesn't have to be as transparent or as open as he is. And I think he's pretty open to talking to anybody. But I mean, I think you could say that about any military person that has had their hand in this sort of pushing for more truth and transparency on this topic. They've all been open. Gary Voorhees.
But they're not the first. They're not the first.
I'm not saying they're the first, but,
no, but I mean,
they're in a first of a new age. Like, this isn't the 60s anymore where we have 2 TV channels and no podcasts. This is a different time. There's a lot of stuff happening. And so, I mean, for me, I think there's a totality to it that, I'm not going to just label one person and go liar, because it's easy to do.
No, I'm not calling him a liar, and nor am I calling him somebody who's not a patriot. I'm sure he has reasons, he has motivations. I'm just saying that giving us part of the story doesn't actually make everything add up. And if we look historically, Mellon and all these other folks, they're not the first. We go back to the 50s. You have NICAP, one of the first UFO organizations. On their board of directors, they had the first director of the CIA, Roscoe Hillenkotter. They had General Albert Wiedemeyer, who was in charge of all deception operations in the U.S. You have a number of folks that end up later, we find out now, that are affiliated with CIA. So there were a lot of intelligence agency interests in the UFO field, just from a different perspective, right? Back then it was, let's control it through the UFO organization. Now the narrative is, let's control it through the DOD, or let's control it through this new office that we start up in whatever department. Is it the same thing? Is it just controlling the narrative again? And so we can be hopeful that it's not, but sort of like that gut feeling about those red flags that tells me that there's something else going on.
I'm curious, James, on if you've been following this latest where Lou Elizondo has been saying kind of what you're saying, which is the government's trying to hijack the UFO topic with this new DOD group that might be in direct to undercut this more transparent effort that he's behind. I mean, what is your take on that?
it's again, you're right. It's weird and it's strange that that's what's happening. It's kind of like, those Russian nested dolls where you take off the first layer and there's another
Yes,
layer there. And you're like,
exactly.
okay, which is the real layer here? Where's the real truth here? So the problem is peeling back that onion when there's so many different forces that are involved now. Because from 1969 until the story broke in the New York Times, it's just been the UFO community. And whatever strange characters that had one foot in the intelligence field and one foot in UFOs would sort of come in and out. But now it's really been embraced by whole of government, right? Now we have Congress involved. Now we have bills being passed.
Yeah,
now
we've got the Senate involved.
Exactly.
But
So
I mean, I think this is a big difference too. You've also got major senators coming out publicly discussing the possibility of this, and just the idea of, hey, we need to pay attention to it and look at it in a serious manner. I mean, just today, Congressman Timberjet was on the floor, essentially railing against this new DOD office, but at the same time gave him, we'll get into it. But this idea that, when Senator Gillibrand passed or proposed her UAP amendment, which I think is a really great step in the right direction from a government standpoint. It at least gives the public a peek behind the curtain with at least one public UAP report that we can look at and, again, open source and do what the community does. But this idea that it's politically popular to talk about this topic today, that I don't think that was really the case in the 60s or the 70s or any other time. I mean, look at Senator Gillibrand's Twitter handle, and her most popular tweets are about this topic and her amendment, and her name is trending in the internet world now, and people are starting to see a 2-page legislative amendment to get us more answers on the UAP topic. For me, that's wonderful progress. And I think a lot of us in the field are super. Red Koala Panda said this yesterday, that we're super impatient because we've done the research past just scratching past the surface. We feel like there's there's something worthy. I mean, even John Greenwald has said he feels there's definitely a cover-up when it comes to the topic, based off of all of the FOIA requests and information that he's gathered. So there's a there. And I think all of this would not shock me. And it also wouldn't upset me if it was a coordinated effort to get people acclimated to the idea that there is something there. And we need to have a real discussion about it, because that's a scary idea. I mean, my sister doesn't watch the Secret of Skinwalker Ranch because it scares her. The idea of those things scare her. But I mean, like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I hope, as you said, there's a there. The question is, will I be alive to see that? Will you? I mean, we're looking at a long, 7 decades.
Fingers crossed, James Carrion. Fingers crossed.
You guys are older than me, so probably, who knows?
Well, here's
Avi Loeb says in the next 10 years.
Avi Loeb says in the next 10 years. And that's another thing too, right? I think a big difference between was it NARCAP you said, or NICAP? NICAP. The biggest difference is also today, like, we have the telescopes are cheaper. The technology is a lot cheaper than it was back in the day. So people can actually legitimately get, I mean, speaking of TikTok, Jane, like, there are great accounts of armchair astronomers getting beautiful pictures of galaxies and our moon and the sun, and they're amazing. And I'm like, oh wow, Avi Loeb's right. This is only like a $10,000 setup where we can get some really crisp, clear pictures, if it's possible,
but
of these phenomena.
I see what you're saying, and actually, I'm most excited about the James Webb Telescope that's put out there in December. Because it's going to actually show whether there's life somewhere else. And I don't think, statistically speaking, that we can say there's not life in the universe. There's absolutely life in the universe. But the question, and what we're discussing right now, and I think what you're saying is, what you're hoping the Galileo project will prove, is whether that intelligent life has visited us.
Right.
And so, can the Galileo project prove that? I hope so. What will the government reveal to us is the other question. And that's the part I'm most worried about.
Well, I don't know. For me, more data is more data. More data is a good thing. I don't care where it comes from.
I would agree with you. Done professionally, done scientifically, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, the beautiful thing about that new amendment is that it does call for scientific coordination with the government. Now, who that is, of course, we have to keep a sharp eye on that thing and make sure that it's not as nefarious as we think it's going to be. But we have to wait and see. But it feels like the right intentions are there from a political standpoint. I don't know about an intelligence standpoint, but from a political standpoint, it seems like there's interest, genuine interest. So I want to get back. We've got our friend TJ Allard in the back here. I want to bring him on because there is the cool thing about TJ has an amazing story about Skinwalker. TJ, how you doing, buddy? Welcome.
Hey, I'm on the show.
You're on the show. Welcome.
Surprise.
Surprise.
Thanks for having me again, guys.
Dude, no, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for being here. So the thing that I found, because I also question the skin. I question everything.
What did I miss? I'm sorry. Tell me what I missed.
You missed it all. No, you're good. But the cool thing about TJ was a producer. Was it executive producer, TJ?
I still am.
Still an executive producer of the Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah.
And he told us a really cool story about working on the ranch for the first season and then going home and being sick and his doctors not being able to really figure out what was going on. Eventually it went away, but it drove him to a point where he's like, I don't ever want to go back there again.
Yeah, I'm all set.
You're all set. So I mean, I just thought it would be cool to bring you on and sort of give your perspective of the ranch, if you could, TJ.
Sure.
And I don't know, did you hear the first half of the show?
No, I didn't. I was with my son playing Minecraft.
No worries, but you have seen we've reviewed the Skinwalker Ranch, right?
Sure.
So you know how we feel about the show. We find it wildly entertaining, but when it comes to the science, I feel like we've discussed this on the scenes and behind the scenes. Like, oh man, there's a lot of missed opportunities. But just personal experience to the ranch and the folks who are working the ranch and the intentions there. I mean, like, what are your thoughts? I mean, well, I know it might be a little biased because you're a producer, but
of course,
but I thought this could be a fun experience.
Of course. No, and I appreciate you asking me to come on. James, it's nice to meet you. I only heard a few things in the background there that you guys were talking about. And I don't know if I missed any Skinwalker talk. Like I said, it was, usually at night I'll play games with my son. It's the only time I'll get to spend with him. And so we've been building a Minecraft world for like 2 years and it's a lot of fun. So that's like, any chance I can to play with them because they grew up too fast. So, but and to clarify, I didn't work on the ranch for the first season. I was there for the pilot episode, for the presentation reel, for the pitch reel, doing all the recon for it, and tracking everything down in kind of boots on the ground research on my own, as someone trying to get the show off the ground. But my first, the first times I was out there, it was, I got super sick. A lot of the things you saw happen to Travis happened to me before it happened to Travis. And I have no intention. I mean, I was out there multiple times over the course of a year and I kept getting sick. So who knows why? I'm not, going to jump to the therefore aliens or anything like that. It was went to every doc I could find in New York City. This was when I was living in the city at the time. And it was all a mystery. And as quickly as it came, it left. I had a lot of residual effects that, some people said it could have been radiation exposure, ears ringing, like a lot of these different symptoms. And but who knows? Obviously something is happening. There's something there. And I'm not to say it's only there. It could be many places. And I'm not saying what it is. I don't know. No one knows what it is. It could be completely natural for all we know. Who knows? And life could be natural. We don't know any of these things. So there's a lot of unknowns here. And, but my stories, I'm all set. Like I'd wake up hearing music. And again, I was the first to tell you, like Lou, I even said to you, like, this could be totally in my brain, man. I could be making this up. It could be psychosomatic. I could have, been just influenced by everyone else saying, "Oh, you're going to hear all this stuff when when you're out there, or things are going to happen." And maybe I started taking the ringing in my ears and making that like music. But my wife would wake up and see me with my ear to the ground at 2 a.m. On our stairwell going up to our bedroom, and like, "What are you doing? Don't you hear the music?" It was like I was in a bad movie. Like, "The music, can't you hear the music?" And she never did. So, and I'm sorry, I feel like, is there some echo or something happening? Or someone's got a TV or something on? Or
I don't know. Do you guys hear an echo?
I hear a slight background and
something.
It could be. I mean, my headphones aren't turned up. Maybe
you scared me, man, because here I am talking about this, and all of a sudden I start hearing stuff.
I know you're not crazy, TJ. I hear.
I'm just kidding.
I mean, I was lagging.
Do you remember what the music was like? I mean, hopefully it wasn't an annoying earworm or something.
No, it was old timey music. Like it was. I swear, if I could hear it again or hear something similar again, and I knew at the time, and I'm sure I have a recording somewhere on my phone of me making the sound, because I recorded everything in my journey, my 2 years to get to the place, to track down Brandon, to track down all the people involved. I recorded everything, and someday, maybe I'll write a book about the journey to get to Skinwalker, because it was doing something that hadn't been done before in the way that I did. I feel like there's a big story there to tell, and Brandon is first to admit it. Like, yeah, man, what you went through, what we put you through, that was you persisted, and that's the only reason why we agreed to do this. So,
well, James, did you have any questions about the ranch that maybe as an executive producer he might be able to shed some light on?
I would love to, James. I'd love to. I saw you. I saw you on Twitter, and a couple of the discussions were going on, and I didn't understand like the anger. I get people get angry on Twitter, and I always find that like, okay, I'm not really sure why. But I'd love to answer that's why I came on, like anything that I can help clarify for you. But please, I would love to, because if you're on the show, then obviously Lou thinks that there's a reason for, that I should be here to kind of discuss it with you. So please, anything I can answer.
Yeah. So there's no anger. It's just the being upset about how some of the prior investigators, like Dr. Frank Salisbury, the brother of the former owner of the ranch, Dr. Garth Myers, and even Junior Hicks, who has been on the show a couple of times, or at least his family has been, how they're being portrayed, at least as the data that's in Dr. Salisbury's book, The Utah UFO Display, that was rewritten and released in 2010. And I was there at the ranch, involved in his reinvestigation, so he could rewrite his book. Because there were things that came out of that trip that were major red flags about the history of Skinwalker. It's not only whether or not there was paranormal activity on the ranch prior to the Shermans, but also things like Junior Hicks telling me that when he was on the ranch, they found these metal rods. Those metal rods were actually on one of your episodes. But the way Junior Hicks characterized those metal rods, he was told by a NID scientist that those rods were analyzed and they were determined to be element 115. Mm-hmm. And anybody who's in the UFO field knows element 115 is tied into the Bob Lazar story, which is tied into Area 51, S4, and all the alleged activity happening there. Mm-hmm. So those were some of the red flags for me back in 2009, 2010, told me that the lore of the ranch, going back pre-Sherman's at least, is really, there's something there that's not right. And that's confirmed in the book, the rewrite of the book. So my beef with Mr. Fugel on Twitter was how he was characterizing those original investigators as not being truthful. And he hasn't been able to prove that they're not truthful.
So you're saying like how Junior wasn't being truthful? I mean, I got to know Junior really well. I did before he passed. I spent a lot of time with Junior. I have a great 4+ hour interview that I did with him outside of Homestead 2 for like literally 4 hours. Him whittling sticks and talking and telling so many stories. He showed me pictures of the rods that you speak of. And some of the stories he had were great. And I met him multiple, I spent many days with him, thanks to Jim Morse. But yeah, so I don't know. So what part of it isn't truthful? If
you read Dr. Salisbury's book, he asked Junior did you have any knowledge of what happened on the ranch prior to the Shermans? And he came out and said, no, I've heard a story from this drugstore clerk about activity on the ranch, but I don't know firsthand that. And Brandon is saying the opposite. He's saying,
I agree.
He admitted to it. He said there was activity on the ranch and he knew the Myers, and his son confirms it. Well, that's not what Junior told us in 2010.
Okay.
And that, he was the co-author of the book. If he had that experience, it should be in the book. That's Junior. But I think
I have an interview with him where he probably does say those things. He tells us about the history of it going back hundreds of, literally 200 years. And he'll bring out paper, like photos and newspaper clippings from all of the stuff that had happened, like from the 50s back to like 1890. Like Junior had a lot of this. He was the keeper. So for him to say that nothing happened, or that there was no activity.
The distinction is we're not talking about the Uinta Basin, because he does have a ton of information about things that happen in the Uinta Basin. We're talking specifically about the Skinwalker Ranch. Okay. So he had no firsthand knowledge that on the ranch itself, strange things were happening before the Sherman family showed up.
That's okay. I got to push back on that. I don't think that's the case. I mean, again, he was telling me stories about when they would go to the ranch because of the lights, the sighting of lights, and that he would tell these stories about the compass reacting to it in a certain way, and a portal opening. Right now, whatever Junior describes as a portal, I don't know, and telling us where to dig to find an entrance to an underground base. Junior, right? This is Junior. If you know Junior, he was great. I mean, I loved him, and there was no reason I ever questioned what he was telling you, that he believed what he was telling you was true. I never got that impression from him. But I don't know. I'd have to go and watch, but I feel like there were so many stories that he was telling that were way back from the ranch itself, like specifically saying Homestead 2, across from Homestead 2 in the Ridge. This is where you have to dig. This is where I was with my daughter. Or was it his daughter? It may have been his daughter. Like, he has these great stories about this. And again, I may be butchering it because I'm kind of, it wasn't what I was expecting to talk about, but
sure. There's no doubt that he has a history of the ranch from when Bigelow owned the ranch, and maybe even a history with the Shermans. I don't know. But he was pretty adamant that there was nothing happening on the ranch that he was aware of before the Shermans showed up.
And so he said that in 2010, but then since then, you're saying that he has changed his story? Is that what you were saying? The story has changed?
Well, that's what's being alleged. I haven't seen him on video changing his story.
Okay. And so Brandon's not corroborating that, or he is corroborating it? And again, I don't speak for Brandon, but I'm trying to get an understanding of where the disconnect is here. Is the question like Brandon's not saying what someone said in 2010? He's disagreeing with what somebody said in 2010. Is that basically what's happening?
No, he's disagreeing with what Junior was adamant about in 2010.
And Junior was adamant about it. We have video. You have interviews of him being adamant about this, or you're saying that?
I was there. I interviewed him, and it's in Dr. Salisbury's book.
Okay, so you have. Okay.
I mean, it kind of sounds like they're attributing a lot of the stuff that happened to the Uinta Basin to Skinwalker Ranch, which, I mean, I can see why they do that, and it doesn't seem like that.
And to what your point, rather, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I know that there's also rumors around Skinwalker Ranch. I don't know, TJ, if you've ever heard of Moonshadow Ranch, and I don't know if maybe some of these really close by locations where there could be stories, but it's not technically Skinwalker Ranch, if that could be causing some of this.
Maybe the lures of these ranches are crossing streams in a way.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, the most well-known place there is Skinwalker. So if anything happens in that area, it's all going to be attributed to Skinwalker. Just human nature. That's just what you do. Because you're not going to be like, well, it actually happened, 3 houses down and 3 ranches. Like, no one says that. No, it's Skinwalker. So if we're splitting hairs over the precise location of it without knowing, I don't know, has the footprint of Skinwalker changed over the year? I mean, I know Moonshadow purchased the land on one side. That is referred to as Moonshadow. And I feel like that has grown. I would imagine that if that were for sale at one point, that would have probably been talked about to be brought into one area. Maybe it goes under the name Skinwalker. I don't know. I'm just saying, like, it just sounds like if we're talking about a general area, this very small town that has a world-renowned place there called Skinwalker Ranch. If anything happens in that small town that's unusual, they're probably going to say, "Oh, it's Skinwalker related." It just seems to me like, so if that's the big beef here is that Brandon saying the junior said something in 2010 when he was, so wait, actually in 2010 he was probably like 82-ish, right? So then he said something different for the next 10 years before he passed.
Yeah, I don't think it's Junior that's the issue. It's actually Dr. Garth Myers, who was the brother of Kenneth Myers. Kenneth Myers and Edith owned the ranch and lived on the ranch for 6 decades. So Dr. Garth Myers in 2010 also said that he's been on the ranch many times. He spent time there as a teenager, spent 3 summers on the ranch. He visited his brother and sister-in-law many times, and after they both died, he was the caretaker and the executor of the ranch. So he's very familiar with the ranch. And in 2010, he was pretty adamant that there was nothing happening on the ranch. So if you look at it from the perspective, not just the region, but a lot of the lore that we see in Hunt for the Skinwalker is directly tied to that property and the Myers and the no digging and all the strange activity happening there when the Shermans were there. So it's calling Dr. Garth Myers untruthful that I have an issue with.
But you don't have an issue calling Brandon untruthful. I just
No,
want to clarify. You're okay with saying
I never said Brandon's being untruthful. He's saying, I believe this because I have firsthand knowledge from these other folks like Gwen Sherman and this alleged video interview with Junior Hicks that nobody has seen. So Brandon is getting one source of information that's contradictory to a different source of information. That source of information means that you have to call one group of folks liars while the other folks are truthful. He's believing one set of folks. I believe an entirely different set of folks. And I'm not calling anybody a liar. I'm just saying, why don't you get your story straight here on the Gwen Sherman side? Because her testimony as given to Ryan Skinner is completely at odds with her husband, Terry Sherman. And why don't we get those things to line up first before we can compare testimonies? But you can't call this guy a liar when you don't know for sure he's lying.
I'm not calling anybody a liar. I don't know. I'm just telling you, like, so you have a husband and wife who are giving you different stories.
But that's what Brandon believes. Brandon believes Gwen Sherman, even though her testimony is at odds with her husband, Terry Sherman.
So you actually, so everyone else, so you're saying you believe Terry Sherman, even though he's at odds with Gwen.
Yeah. Well, Terry Sherman also
you're picking a side.
Yeah. Terry Sherman, also interviewed in 2010 by Dr. Salisbury, said, I believe whatever Garth Myers is telling you. That there was no activity on the ranch prior to us buying it. So that's the issue. But, all that aside, if we look at it from the point of view that who cares about what the historical activity is if there's alleged real activity happening on the ranch, right?
Yeah, I'm with you. I find it, I mean, we have people who are disagreeing about the it sounds to me like the husband and wife both have a different story, and that's probably not too uncommon in the world. But yeah, if you're talking about now, there's plenty of activity going on now. You've seen it on the show. There's been, enough chatter about it. I mean, we're even seeing images getting leaked now from what just happened out there recently. So it's, I mean, there's definite activity. Who knows what it is? And we're doing the best we can to kind of capture it and present it to people in a way that makes it entertaining. So, I mean, if you
James,
do you agree that there's activity? It's a question that there is no activity. Is that I'm sensing that there's no activity actually happening there, conversation coming.
No, not at all.
Okay.
I want to be very clear on what I consider good data. And so all the data I've looked at tells me that the activity started when the Shermans arrived. And even if
let's move past that. You said the historical. Let's move past the historical. Like get to the now. The now.
Let's look at the now. What's happening on the ranch right now? All we see is what we can view through our TV, and it's entertaining, like you said. I don't find it very scientific. I think there were, but then if you do true science, then it is boring and it's not entertaining. So there you have this catch-22 of how do you present a docuseries and keep folks' interest. No one's going to want to look at an instrument squiggling back and forth for the whole show, right? They want something that excites them. And so, from that point of view, I can understand the entertainment aspect of it. I think at the same time, though, you could introduce real science. For example, the claim that there is an energy 5,000 feet above the ranch over this triangle that they keep shooting rockets up at, which I find to be interesting. Why not tether a weather balloon with all the instruments you want that is observing 24 hours a day? You can tether a balloon at 5,000 feet, keep it there permanently, and gather data all year long. I mean, that would be
I think that is awesome. So here's the reality check that I tell to people all the time. Every idea that you have had, we have had. Every idea that you could possibly think of, it's been thought of. You are not a beautiful, unique snowflake with your ideas. It's unfortunate that people have to hear that. But there are limitations. There are budget limitations. There are a number of things that go into this. And if you ever worked in production, you understand this. That how difficult something that sounds so simple, put a weather balloon, tether it, put every instrument you need. Yes. That was basically the pitch for the show that I did to History, which was, hey, let's do Oak Island, where you spend a really long period of time at a place. And instead of fighting ghosts on the weekends with no shirt on and saying this is paranormal, like Zach Baggins does on Ghost Hunters, let's plant ourselves there for a long period of time and study something. It came down to, is that actually happening somewhere? And it sure enough, it was happening somewhere. If it wasn't, there'd be no show, because all of those things that sound so simple are ridiculously expensive to do, and the resources required and all of that, yada, yada, yada. So yeah, maybe we get there. If more seasons happen, of course those things could happen. I mean, why wouldn't they? It's not like that's a novel idea. This is what people do in science experiments. But if you did all of that at once and you don't get a result, now what? Now what's next? Okay, so we're going to keep it there for 6 months. Okay, do you want to watch it there 6 months? Everyone's going to say yes. Let's put a streaming camera on YouTube and watch this balloon for 6 months, and we'll chart the data. Great. Are you going to maintain the cameras that are going to do that broadcast? Who's going to pay for that? Who's going to chart this data and log it and capture it and then put it in a format that can be analyzed? Because I love this phrase, and I told Lou this before, like everyone's like, show me the data. Oh, really? And what are you going to do with that data? Do you know how to parse the data? Do you know how to put it in the correct format so you can run it through Alteryx or R or Python? Do you know how to, do a regression algorithm? KNN? Do you know any of this? Most people have no clue what any of that is. And so when people say, show me the data, it's like, okay, great. You can see the data, and what are you going to do with it? Oh yeah. Like someone had mentioned something about like putting data out there for people to see, or, in the past. And it comes down to like, who's going to host that? Who's going to maintain the downloads of it? Who's going to track it and say, hey, is this legit? And now I need to see, you can't just put the data out. I need to see the collection process. I need to see how that data was pulled in, what instrumentation was done or used to do this. So
sure. So I get what you're saying. And I can see many scientists, as you're saying, telling you exactly how you should do your experiments, and you saying, okay, there's an expense to that we can't absorb. But there are simple things you can do. I mean, when Dr. Travis Taylor claims that he got hit with ionizing radiation and his doctor told him so, there are lab results. There's data already there. You don't have to collect it anymore. You could get his doctor on camera, actually testifying to the fact that it was ionizing radiation.
But is that interesting though? Is it more interesting than hearing this?
Absolutely, it's interesting.
More interesting than hearing the guy who hit it, who got it hit? More interesting
it's corroborating. It's to corroborate the story. You can say that we had this.
Yeah.
But you need to.
I agree with James. It's hard to believe something you hear on a reality TV show.
Of course,
more
I
proof
agree.
is always good.
I agree. If you want to have some kind of corroborating evidence, then great. Like, okay. I mean, that's again. Then I have to send a camera. You have to send a camera crew out there to shoot the doctor, do scheduling with him, put it together, and then bring that into post, and then edit that together, and then make sure that Travis has sound. Like, that's not just that simple to do. You add tens of thousands of dollars to a budget to do those kind of things. If you're doing it for every single piece. So I guess maybe there's a confusion with people when they don't know production, how these things work. I mean, Lou, you work in entertainment, you understand this. Like,
yeah, I
is not a joke.
No, I can attest to that, especially when it comes to a doctor's schedule. Like, they don't have time to to, oh yeah, I'll sit here for 3 hours and corroborate and go over all of the lab results with you. Like, not every doctor's going to sit down there and do that. Not to say that you didn't ask him or that wasn't thought of, but then to coordinate that with the production team, it's not as easy as it sounds. I will say that for TJ.
I find it simple easy to get the doctor on Skype or Zoom in the command center there on the Skinwalker Ranch, flick the button on the TV, and have them testify that, yes, there was something that was a blast of ionizing radiation.
That's assuming that
you don't have to send a camera crew to wherever he saw his doctor.
No, but but you're assuming that the doctor wants to be on camera and talk about that. Like, I mean, I'm just saying that,
and that he's good on camera. So I do think we're right. Like, he may be the worst on camera, right? And
get a doctor.
I think we are talking about a TV show, right? Versus it does like Galileo science. Project, right? Like, it's not, when Avi Loeb goes to collect data for the Galileo project, we're not expecting a TV show from him. So he can make, a case that, we need to look at it this way. So I think what I think we have an opportunity though with the Skinwalker Ranch show is there's a TV show. So we have all these nuggets and this information that then the rest of us can work with and apply to maybe other areas of the Utah basin that maybe you could go visit, right? Or, I recently, for the Big Phone Home 2, we're talking to Lori Ruffelt, former U.S. Air Force, and she was talking about how the Rendlesham base and the way she was talking about it reminded of things from the Skinwalker Ranch show. So that helped me. So I do think, how could we expect, a History Channel show to do all these things? I don't think I have that expectation, but I share the curiosity and intense desire to want to corroborate, Dr. Taylor's story. I mean, Luis knows I was part of the Skinwalker Ranch review. So I'm right there with you, James. I think it's the expectations and, ratings is different than disclosure, right? Being the goal.
So here's my point. Is it science or is it entertainment? And
it's
for
both,
you to tell me, I don't agree with that. I'm sorry.
So
for it to be science, you have to back up your claims. So you can't just make a claim on TV and say, this is proof of something, or this is the scientific approach we're taking, and yet leave holes in your claims. And this example of the ionizing radiation blast is a major hole for me, because that's a major, it's kind of like, episode 1, where I think it was Thomas Winterton. He made this claim that they were talking about, the nuclear blast in Utah and the downwind radiation effects. And he made a statement that I guess nobody in the production staff even bothered to check on, because he said, well, the highest reading of radiation taken in the state of Utah was 30 miles from here. No, it's not. That whole northeast corner of the state is not even downwind of the blast, where there's a whole agency set up to compensate people for being exposed to the radiation from that time. So to make a claim that it's not even true, right? And to let that just fly out there with nobody questioning that. And then to base, we got hit by a blast of ionizing radiation, and somehow that proves that there was a downwind effect from the nukes from the 50s. You got to back that up. You back it up and just, actually show some data for that. Either a doctor's note or a doctor's report, or get the doctor on camera, something that actually is more than just saying somebody says, look, my finger here got hit by, ionizing radiation. That's not science.
So at what point do someone's credentials come into play that you take them at face value? So for example, if a PhD in astrophysics tells you this, and with their reputation on the line, to say, hey, like with Brandon, for example, I don't see anything to this day where Brandon's like, yes, he goes and tells everyone, I own this ranch and it has been nothing but rainbows and lollipops for me. No, he has to deal with all of this constant picking at the data, at what he's done. He's put himself out there for that, just like Travis Taylor's done. So if Travis is saying this, knowing that he works for that he's affiliated with government, that he's affiliated with NASA, that he's affiliated with universities, for him to say that, don't you think that it all plays into this? Like, why, if he goes and says something completely fabricated, you don't think there's any repercussions to him in his career? Like, I find that a little strange that, like, and where do you, I don't know, maybe you do have a PhD in physics, or maybe you do know everything about ionizing radiation that there is. And who are you to question him? Like, where's your credentials? So for someone to say it's not science, it's not science, it drives me nuts.
Credentials are not the issue.
They're not the issue. Okay, so you're saying that
I know a million PhDs, all from, when I was the director of MUFON, we had a whole set of consultants that were PhDs.
Right.
And they produced analysis and they produced reports. And sometimes what they produced, regardless of their impeccable credentials, was just garbage.
Yeah, I can agree. I can attest to that. But I'm trying to, the picture I'm trying to paint is, if you have somebody who has everything to lose and nothing to gain by saying these things, why would he say these things? It's not for the money. If you know television, people aren't making the money that they think they do. People on YouTube make way more money than people do in television, okay, and cable TV. So they should probably get that out there. And I know that this still costs Brandon money to make this show out of his pocket. Doesn't matter if you believe or not, because you don't know. I do. I see the budgets. So this is the kind of stuff that bothers me when I get this kind of pushback from people about these things.
But I'm not even calling anybody a liar. I'm not talking about their reputation or what they have to lose. I'm simply asking them to back up their claims. How difficult is that?
It's not difficult at all. But even if they did, then what if I showed you a doctor's note? So this is his doctor.
That would be great. That would be
your first reaction? Your first reaction would be, oh, this is not a doctor. That's not a real doctor. No, you just made that up for the TV show.
No. I'm not saying that. But okay. I'm saying that that's something that could be investigated. I could find out if he's a real doctor, right? I could look at his background, and so, but those are pieces that need to be provided. You can't, just making a claim doesn't make it true. That's my point. So when you say it's science, it can't be science unless you have data you produce that other folks can look at and you actually back it up and corroborate it.
But there are other folks looking at it. It's just not everybody. Like, do you understand that? Like, just because you're not looking at it doesn't mean other people aren't looking at it. Like, there are hundreds of people that work on this. You understand that, right?
Hundreds of people that do it voluntarily, or you're paid?
No, they get paid to work on the show.
You just said they were expensive to hire.
Yes, they are. And do you know do you know how many people work for production companies and work at History Channel?
I was involved in a couple of them, and I don't know their budgets, but I do know that when I said, let's perform an experiment, that, we're going to have to do this with data that we release. We can't just make claims, right? We have to actually back this up. So that's all I'm asking, right? Back up the claims. But like you just said that, I'm sorry, you can't call it science. I think if you got any,
we could disagree with that. We could disagree with that. Just because you don't get to see what's happening behind the scene doesn't mean it's not science. It means it's not science to you, and that's fine.
I understand your position here, because I may end up doing this. If I go out there and grab some folks from academia and I have them watch 18 hours of your show, will you believe whether they call it science or not?
Okay, I can answer that question with a question. If I did the same exact thing and got folks from academia and they said that it was, would you call it science?
I would if they said it was.
Right. And okay, great. And if you have 18 people that say that it's not, and I find 18 from academia that say that it is, then who's right?
This is not expert testimony on a stand.
That's what I'm saying. Then why would you bring that up?
It's either science or it's not science, right?
Well, I think.
Well, that's not necessarily true, though, because they could be doing science, a scientific method on the ranch, but not showing us the entirety of the scientific method.
Right? Entertainment.
Yeah, well, I think it kind of just hits on the nail of kind of what Jane was saying, is managing your expectations. And I think that's the hardest part with this topic, is managing your expectations. Because if your expectation is for a History Channel show to give you all of the science and all of the data of the stuff that they're filming, I don't believe that's at the core of the production. The core of the production is to entertain with sprinkles of science, and the real science is done by the people who work on the ranch and are actually paid to do that stuff. Mm-hmm. And whenever they decide to share it, they're going to share it in however they want to share it, because it's their data. They're paying for it. They're exposed to the expenses of it. And I can understand how, if you had all of that, you could say, well, go kick rocks. We'll give it to you when we're ready. Like, that's just kind of the
that's no different
table
than
we're sitting at, unfortunately.
So just to make sure I understand this, so if we take an episode, for example, where I think it was one of the first season where they were drilling some holes in one of the homestead. I think they drilled 2 holes.
Sure.
And then they gave up because there was some alleged anomaly under the ground. And then in a later episode, they drilled somewhere else, and I don't know how many holes, couple holes, and they gave up. So are you telling me then that there's more data there than what we're seeing there? Did they drill 1,000 holes and we just don't know about it?
Potentially. I mean,
no,
it's production.
I'm asking, you were there.
No, I wasn't there I said I wasn't there for season 1. I was there prior to season 1. I was there for putting it all together. No, I don't know what the production team did on site. Chances are, yeah, there's probably a lot more holes that were drilled. Because that's production, right? You do take after take after take after take. You just continue to drill. You continue to do it. You don't just say, we're only going to drill 3 holes. No, you have the equipment for the day. You're going to use it the whole day. That's just how it works. You rented it. You paid for it. It's going to be used. So chances are, yeah, there's more data. It's just people aren't privy to that. And I see that. I'm seeing that more and more, that how much of a problem that is for people to like accept that, like, you're not the beautiful, unique snowflake. You don't get access to this. You didn't spend the money to buy the ranch to do this. You didn't open up your life to others to get this information. But I feel like, Brandon has done so much of it so far, like releasing this, letting people see all of this. Like, yes, I think that in time, everything everyone wants to see will come out. I have a problem with like the fact that so much data has been released right now, but no one's done anything with it. And I keep saying this, like, there's equipment has been listed and mentioned on the show. Anomalies have been illustrated on the show. Has anybody gone and put any of that information together, any of that data, to say, hey, guess what? This equipment does or doesn't register this in the basin because XYZ. This equipment is highly reactive to this in this context. I have seen nobody do anything even close to that. So there's plenty of science there. People are just, they want what they want. They don't want the actual science and the data. They want the data that they want. And that just really kind of rubs me the wrong way.
That goes for all entertainment, though, man.
Of course.
I mean, if you're going to give me a show on Skinwalker Ranch, I want all of it. Yeah, I mean, I'm a consumer. I'm a greedy bastard that
yes.
way. I want to see the doctor's note, too. I want to see everything. But I also know how production works and how, hey, maybe they just didn't think of it. Like, it's just possible they didn't even think or contemplate that in the production.
Yes, and you know what else? They didn't contemplate putting Junior's 4-hour interview in that we had, and they went with this family. They didn't, like there's things that get missed because they're not important. They're not, that one was a big oversight.
It's not even so much not important.
Right.
It's just you got to fit everything in an hour.
Right.
And it sounds like a long time. Look,
51 minutes and
both of you guys, for me, both of you guys raise great points. And both of you guys, I feel like, are passionate about it and just want more data and more truth. And that's fair. Like, that's fair to ask for. It's fair to expect, but it's also fair to not get because you don't own it and it's not yours. So there are two sides to this. I mean, look,
Can I make a point here, Luis?
Oh, yeah, but real quick, I'm all for a weather balloon. I would watch a 24-hour. I would always have it on my stream. If you had a 24-hour camera strapped to a weather balloon with a whole bunch of tethered equipment, like that would be awesome for me. That would be great. But yes, James, go on.
All right. So I don't think anybody watching, for example, Ancient Aliens can call that history. Would you agree with that?
I would, yes.
There's some nuggets.
Yes. There's some nuggets, but yes, I would agree with that.
Interesting nuggets.
But then again, I don't think, using your example, like, I don't think academics would watch Skinwalker Ranch. I just don't think that'd be a show they'd be into.
All right, let me use a different example here. Would you call The Curse of Oak Island treasure hunting?
Yeah.
Absolutely, 100%.
You would,
I
right?
would.
There's 9 seasons of Oak Island.
I love that show. You better not knock no
Oh, no,
James
please.
Carrion.
I like this. I like where you're going.
There's 9 seasons, but at some point, and I know a lot of folks, because I watched a few seasons of it, you get to the point where you're like, are they ever going to really find something here, or am I just going to spend my time, spinning my wheels with everybody else?
So how's this? Every treasure hunter in America who's been looking for these treasures for 200 years, are they ever going to find anything? You know what I'm saying? Like people looking, they're still looking in the Grand Canyon.
Here would be my counter to that is that's the scientific method. It's as boring as could possibly be. Like they try and they fail, they try and they fail, they try and they fail. They come back with new data every single year, and every year they try something different because doing the same thing and getting the same no results is a waste of time. But I mean, look, I'm a big fan of that show. I've been watching that all 9 seasons, and after this show, I'm gonna go watch yesterday's episode. And I can tell you that show, I wish is what Oak Island was. To me, it has a great scientific.
You
method.
wish that was Skinwalker was like that.
Yes, correct. Yes, sorry. Thank you for correcting me. Because they don't come back with any conclusions based off what they find. They're just presenting to you the data. This is what it is. This is what it's made from. We ran it through. They show you how they run it through the scanners, and they figure out where the metal, what part of the world it came from. Why is that 150 feet under the ground? That shouldn't be there. It is the scientific method in the most entertaining way that I have watched. And as I don't know a damn thing about treasure hunting, but this feels like treasure hunting to me because it's frustrating because they're getting little nuggets here and there of and trying to paint a picture. They're collecting as much data, like the data. If you had the data from season 1 versus the data from season 9, and you put that all together in a building on a flat surface, it would be massive. The amount of things.
They have a museum there that pretty much does just that.
It would be a ton of stuff, man. And so I wish Skinwalker would take a cue from that show, because I think it would be way. I think it would satisfy all of those things that I think all of us want: more data, more cooperation, and at the same time, not telling us what it is, or trying to intimate what it is, but just leaving it for, hey, here's the data. You make up your mind.
James, what would treasure hunting be? Like I
think of treasure hunting. I think of pirates and like an X on the map, and that's what I think of.
It's absolutely treasure hunting. There's no doubt about that. I mean, it's no different than somebody taking a submersible underneath because they think there's a wreck there, and then they know historically there's probably gold in this this wreck. So it's similar to that. The only reason I bring that up is because when you look at Treasure Island, the hunters
of Oak Island,
the Curse of Oak Island.
Is that right? Is that right? No, it's not. Anyway, go on. Yeah, go on.
Their ultimate goal is to find that treasure. Right? They know what they're looking for. Right? There is some lore about a treasure, and they want to find it.
Well, they think it's something, right? They don't know what it is. They
might find something else along the way, though. But they find other things along the way, or surprising things along the way that makes the show interesting, and that ends up it might be something completely different, right, than what they were looking for.
True.
I mean, having seen episodes, that's usually
that's not what I was expecting.
Is it gold? Is it Shakespeare's writings, lost writings? Is it the Ark of the Covenant? Something, right? Something. Yeah. Okay. That's the treasure. When you look at Skinwalker, what is the ultimate goal of investigating the Skinwalker Ranch?
Right now, the ultimate goal is the ultimate goal for the show, or the ultimate goal for Brandon?
Well,
because they're not one and the same.
But Brandon's saying his goal is science.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
because his goal is he was doing it before there was a show. He was doing it whether or not there was a show. His goal is to quest for truth. The show, like any product, is to sell. That's what it is. Obviously, you have to have the elements of what the core of that show is Brandon's quest for the truth. We are flies on the wall in Brandon's quest for the truth. So these experiments that are happening, they're really happening. The science that I'm going to continue to call science because it is, that's happening is happening. There are PhDs there. There are people on staff there. There are people going over this. It's just to understand, me step back. If you think of Oak Island in the season 1 of Oak Island, they didn't have devices that were analyzing on site. They would say, we're going to send this off. And they would not even address things for like 2 seasons down the road. They didn't have the resources of it. Like another good example is a huge show, Game of Thrones. The first season of Game of Thrones, the reason they didn't show the battle scenes is because they didn't have the budgets to show the battle scenes. They didn't have the budgets to show people, so they put it in the dark. You would just see the main characters interact and assume there were things happening. To go back to the Oak Island part of it, 2 seasons later, you're finding out that what they found underground 150 feet down that wasn't supposed to be there actually wasn't supposed to be there because it's made out of X, Y, and Z. The same production team, Prometheus, that did Oak Island is doing this show. We're just getting started right now. So all of this stuff, I'm not saying that it's not coming. Brandon said the same thing. It is going to come. It's unfortunate that the entertainment business works this way. It's rough. Like, we all wish we could have it now. Like, I wish that I could have seen all 21 Marvel movies immediately, but you have to wait 5 years for that, or 6 years or whatever it was. Yes, and I understand the criticisms, and I get all of that, and I play devil's advocate, and I poke the bear sometimes with it because there's people, you just don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And I think a lot of this stuff is going to come. People are going to, you just got to just chill. It's going to happen. It's just, yes, it's not like, I want to have this conversation. Hopefully we get to season 9, like Oak Island, right? Yeah. Let's have this conversation at season 9. And when they have devices on site and electron microscopes and this, that, and the other, and then they'll say, hey, remember back when we were doing season 2 and nothing existed and we couldn't tell this and we didn't have a doctor's note and we didn't have any of this? Like, these notes are being passed. This information is being cataloged. People will address these things. I didn't realize a doctor's note was such a big deal. Like, to be honest, I had no idea that was a sticking point for people. I mean, hey, no, I get it.
No, that makes sense. I mean, and you're right. Like now on the season, they have like a spectrum analyzer right there on the island. Right. So if they come across metal, they clean it off. They know exactly what it is immediately without sending it to university. And that's because the production's gotten bigger. That and equipment's gotten cheaper. That fits the budget now.
Yeah.
So I can understand that, but still, I want it now.
Of course.
I want it today. So if you can make that happen. But gentlemen, okay, so we're coming up to the end of the hour here. I appreciate both of you guys entertaining this conversation. I thought it was a lot of fun. I think it was a good way forward and maybe helping understand each other's positions and where we're coming from and what our standards are and comparing it to other people's standards and seeing where we can meet in the middle. So I appreciate the time that you guys gave to the conversation today. I thought that was a lot of fun. There was one more question here for James. And I guess we'll end on this real quick. And then maybe if Jane and Rather want to stick around, we'll talk about real quick what Senator Tim Burchett said on the floor today, and we could talk about that. But the last question here is, hello, y'all. What does James think of the Bledsoe family experiences after investigating them, and Ryan's views that MUFON sabotaged the case?
All right. So for those who don't know, the Bledsoe family had this experience in 2008. I actually went and investigated their experiences as part of a Discovery Channel show called UFOs Over Earth. We interviewed all the witnesses that were there, the entire family. They did voluntary lie detector tests with both the father and the son, which did not show truthful. So I'm not really sure why they think MUFON sabotaged the case, because everything that was done with consent and proper investigative technique. So, but at the same time, I think it's Ryan Bledsoe that's also claiming that I'm a CIA guy, when that as told to him by another CIA guy, which makes no sense because the CIA is not in the business of outing their own agents. So it's a little strange to me. So I would just say that everything that was done in 2008 was on the up and up. I'm not sure why they're saying that it wasn't.
Fair. All right. Well, gentlemen, again, I appreciate you being here. I thought that was a lot of fun. James, I hope you had a good time. I hope you'll come back. I found it a great conversation talking with you. TJ, Same to you, my good sir.
course.
Before you get out of here, James, please tell everyone where they can find your blog. I've got your link in the description below. So if anybody wants to follow James or ask him any questions on Twitter, he's a pretty easy guy to talk to. So go ahead and interact with him if you can. But please, the floor is yours, sir.
Sure. So you can find my blog at historydeceived.blogspot.com. History Deceived. I have 2 free books up there for download. I don't charge for my books, so in my research, feel free to download it.
Right on. All right, James. Well, appreciate you being here, and look forward to talking to you again soon, sir.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you. TJ.
Yes.
Thanks for coming by, man, and giving us your perspective. Thought it was helpful.
I mean, I hope I'm pretty open about stuff, man, and I'll ask.
Yeah, I mean, the cool thing, and this is why. That's why I like you guys at the Skinwalker Ranch. The cool thing about you guys is that you come on shows like this that have 180 people watching or however many people, and you answer these questions that people have that want answers to, and you're as open as you can be, without violating, of course, any NDAs or things like that. But like, I can understand your frustration from a production standpoint, for being an EP, a producer, and just people going, well, why didn't you do this? I don't know, man, because we didn't have the goddamn budget, like we didn't have the time. We didn't have the personnel. The doctor had 15,000 appointments before we could get this in the can. Like, there are so many things that happen behind the scenes in a production. So for me, I can sympathize with that because I know about those growing pains. And I think you're right, and this is something that I did not consider. I hope you guys get 9 seasons, because if by season 9 it looks the same as season 1, then I think we'll have a legitimate conversation and some actual legitimate complaints. But for right now, I think being patient, letting the show grow, letting it getting a bigger budget, a bigger audience, that will lead to those things that I think people want. That was a cool perspective, so I appreciate that.
No, of course. I just love coming on and talking with you guys. And Squiddy, like, I wish we had more time. Like, can I feel like you still have questions that I didn't get to answer from last time we talked?
Well, do you have one more question, Squid?
Please, man.
Have they investigated biological effects? One of my new theories is that it might be something in the dirt, something that maybe infected you and caused you to hear odd music and other people to see dino beavers. And I'd like to see some microscopes and biology going on down there.
I don't know anything about dino beavers, but I do know, and I think I may have mentioned this last time we were on, the idea of like the blood testing, the samples that they were doing. And my doc initially thought, when my original doctors in New York thought it was biological, like really thought it was, and used the phrase, quote, alien, because it very well could be alien, like it could be biological. And I'm with you. I think it could be. That does not discount that it could be otherworldly biological.
Alien parasite.
Yeah. Listen, my doctor said that to me. and she's...
Well, did you get him on tape, TJ?
No.
Okay, go get a doctor's note before you start making claims like that to us around here, please.
And I wanted to say this, and I didn't get a chance to say it to James. I enjoy robust conversations, right? I enjoy like talking, and this is who I am, right? So I'm very out there. I'm very open about this stuff, and I get very animated with it. And the stuff with the doctor, I get all that, but I made the statement about the credentials of people, and I don't want anyone to think that relying on people's credentials matters, because it doesn't. There's plenty of people with credentials who are full of it. I just know that if you think that if you think something and I want to say lay person, right? We're not lay people. We're just people, and we all have ideas and thoughts, and everyone should be heard. But I think I made it clear, like, we're not beautiful, unique snowflakes, man. We all have these ideas. And I don't want someone to say, like, your idea doesn't matter, or think that I believe your idea doesn't matter because you don't have a PhD. Because it does. Right. I'm a firm believer, and you need people that don't have the limitations of a PhD to be throwing in there, like, hey, you know what? A toothpick can cure cancer if you burn it at this temperature with this whatever. Like, a doctor PhD wouldn't think of that. No, I'm not saying... I'm just making stuff up, obviously, to make the point of you need out of the box or around the box thinkers to address these problems. And I hope I didn't, I don't want people to think like it's only your credentials that matter. I mean, but for a TV show like this, you understand you have a limited amount of time. And if you're going to add another beat or another scene with a doctor's note and all of this, it's going to take away from other parts of the story. So how do you skip that? Well, you rely on someone's credentials to speak for them in this case. That is kind of the shortcut to credibility in that limited time frame for right now that you have available to you.
Well, God, man, that's society, right? Like, we depend on the people with the highest credentials to give us good information. Doesn't mean that they're always right, but it's the starting point, at least. I think for most productive societies, is we look to the experts, we look to the people who really look at the data and the information and hope to gain some sort of perspective or knowledge that is correct. But you're right. Like, just because you got the PhD doesn't mean you're correct, especially when it comes to this topic, because it's hard to nail down. It's like trying to catch smoke. Brick Top with a $5 donation before we let TJ go.
Brick Top.
If someone presented a little doctor's note as proof on a TV show, it would be laughed as utter BS. FYI, I'm gonna tell you right now, this show would have laughed at that.
Yes,
if you guys had a doctor's note, we would have absolutely taken you to the house for that. Like, but if we had a doctor on tape going over results, that would have been pretty cool.
I don't agree with that. I push back and say, no, people would call BS, and that's not a real doctor. He's just a fake doctor, and he got his degree from the internet.
I think people would go through the Utah doctors whatever list and find that dude and then figure out whether or not he was a legitimate doctor. But I'm assuming that he probably went to an emergency room of some kind, and it was probably a pretty. Was he in there? How long was he in there?
I think it was over. No, it wasn't even overnight. It wasn't overnight. There was no
I would assume this is kind of like hey, I'm not feeling well. I think I have radiation burns. Can you check this out, kind of thing? And you stayed there for the day as they ran your blood, and then you got the results probably a couple days later.
Well, if you could get the doctor on the next season and just get the doctor to say that something about portals, I be great.
That would be awesome. All right, TJ, my man, thank you so much for coming around. Tell people where they can find you on Twitter, because you're also another very interactive person on the Twitter world.
I am. I'm at TJ Allard. I got it on the screen here. At TJ Allard on Twitter. I appreciate you guys all watching the show and everyone taking such an interest in it. I mean, this is, I'm hoping that in the next month I'm going to have something else that is going to really kind of the next step. I want to say stuff so badly.
A new show or next step in season 3?
No, a different another show,
a new project.
Yes, something different that is I just.
Well, you didn't call me, so I've got nothing to do with it. So there's one piece of information for it.
Listen, I still think you need to be doing drunk UFO history.
Oh my God! Yeah, I know. We need a budget though. It's got to be done right. It's got to follow that formula, or it doesn't work.
I think you guys. I think you guys. What you do here is great. And UFO Jane, I wish I had more time to speak with you too. Like, I feel like I feel like I know you guys, but I don't, because I have a one-way relationship where I watch you. And
dude, you'll come back. We'll have you back on the show. We'll just have you, and then we could talk. Well, look, season 3's coming up. So, we're definitely going to be reviewing and talking about season 3. So please, we look forward to having you on a lot more in the near future.
Awesome. Well, I'm around.
Are you allowed to talk about a release premiere date yet?
No.
Okay.
I listen. I try
when
to.
When does last year's come out?
I want to say it was May. I think
you heard it here first, folks.
No!
Skinwalker Ranch season 3.
No,
May 3rd. I don't know, on the History Channel.
I didn't say that. That was last season.
I won't believe it until I see a note.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Travis Taylor's doctor.
Nice. Well, thank you again, everybody, and check me out on Twitter. Hey, listen, man, reach out to me, people. I'm always listening. I'd love to hear stories and people's experiences and. I feel like we're shaking the tree here. We're going to get more people talking. And if you want to, get exposure on want to bring it to a network, something, I'm your guy. So
Right on.
thanks
All right,
again.
TJ. Thank you, my man. We'll see you
Take
soon.
care. All right. Thanks.
Bye. Okay. That was a fun show.
Yeah. Well, we settled it, right?
We
Yeah.
went all
We
across
settled
the
it. We
spectrum.
figured out Skinwalker Ranch. No, everybody go home now. It's all figured out. But I mean, look, they both made great points, right? And I had a feeling that's where the conversation was going to go. I'm thankful it didn't. Nobody got insulted. Nobody, it didn't go into a mud throwing place. It was like you said, robust conversation. It's sometimes hard to ask these questions because you don't want to insult anybody. Because in a way, you're like, I don't believe you, like I don't believe what you're saying, or I believe that the data you're looking at is not as concrete as the data that I'm looking at. And so having these conversations and finding where the differences is, and I think the three of us were a pretty good buffer in sort of in making sure that, hey, look, this is a good point. Yes, I agree with you. I'm with you there, but I also agree with you here. And there is a middle ground here, no?
Yeah, well, I don't know. Like without UCR, well, because you have got like the TV show, right? And then all the science that's missing, and then you can have this place here where we can hash it out and get some science out of it. So yeah, if we want there to be a middle ground.
Yeah.
What
do you think, Rather?
Yeah, I mean, there's no science that's going to prove anything to us presented on Skinwalker, in my opinion, but there's tidbits of information that are, using scientific means that are useful and interesting. So yeah, I do think that I can see both sides of the argument.
Yeah. Hey, UFO Classified with Erica Lukes is in the house. What's up, Erica?
Hey, Erica.
Thank you for being here, my lady. Okay, well, do you guys want to stick around, and can you stick around and talk about Tim Burchett? Yeah, you guys want to do this?
Yeah, I haven't watched it. I've just seen the headlines, so I'm curious.
So we're just gonna stick on this for the rest of the show, and let's see how long we go. I'm thinking of probably about a half hour or so. But this was some cool news today. So today we had Tim Burchett speaking on the floor. Congressman Director of National. Let me. I think. Hold on, let me wait for this to catch up. I'm lagging a little bit here, you guys, so I apologize. There it goes. So here's Representative Congressman Tim Burchett, who had 5 minutes to talk about basically whatever he wanted. And this is what he chose to do with his time.
Last summer's UFO report, Mr. Speaker, from the Director of National Intelligence was bogus. The report raised more questions than answers about unidentified objects in the skies. It stunk of a government cover-up, Mr. Speaker. Now the Pentagon is starting a new office to collect information on these unidentified objects. The office is called the Airborne Object Identification and Management Synchronization Group. I don't know where they came up with that name.
I don't know why. Can you guys see a picture here? Because I can't.
No, I don't know why.
Okay, well, we got the audio.
Yeah,
the picture's not really necessary. There, for some reason, man, I need a new computer. But this is we're not missing anything visually here. So I pardon me for the video not showing. But it was interesting that right off the bat he called the report bogus. What do you got, Rather? You're muted.
I think if they wanted to cover it up, they would have covered it up. I don't think the UAT task force covered anything up. I think that it did raise more questions, but if they didn't want those questions raised, they wouldn't have raised them.
Well, it's possible. I mean, we asked him on the big phone home if he got to see the classified briefing, and he couldn't comment one way or the other, but maybe he is seeing this classified briefing and thinking to himself, yeah, this six-page report was bogus. We need more. The American people need more.
Yeah, I thought when he talked to us that he kind of poo-pooed the classified report as well. But maybe I'm misremembering that.
I don't know if he poo-pooed it, but he couldn't really talk about it because he couldn't verify one way or the other whether or not he's seen it because it's a classified report. But I mean, if we're going off kind of what Jazz said last week, where the thing that inspired Kirsten Gillibrand to write her amendment is because she, as part of the subcommittee that she serves on, she got to see not only the reports, the classified briefings, but she also got to talk to the pilots and talk to them in a private setting. And then that's what led her to write this wonderful piece of legislation that we're all hoping passes, which looks like it maybe could go down tomorrow. So stay tuned. But maybe that's where Tim is speaking from on this aspect of it.
Then it's not a cover up, right? If they is he saying that they're trying to cover it up from the public or cover it up from Congress? It sounds like he's saying that the DoD is trying to cover it up from Congress, which, if what you're saying is true about Kristen Gillibrand, then that's not the case.
Fair. Jane, what do you got?
Well, I saw his tweet and he was calling for UFO transparency, which to me says that he saw something in the classified report, not that that he thought should be shared with the rest of us, not that he would think the classified report was bogus. But I don't know if he says anything else in the C-SPAN clip, but
he does. Yeah, we can play the rest of the clip.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
I'm sure they paid somebody a lot of money to come up with that. I do not trust this new office, Mr. Speaker. I don't think it'll be transparent with lawmakers or the public about its findings. This is a national security issue. Congress needs to know what is going on so we can respond accordingly. Today, I'm requesting the leaders of this new office bring members of Congress on their bring them in on their UFO findings. This is a matter of great public interest and has been for a very long time to a lot of Americans. Our government should not hide the truth from us for another second. If this new office is to be held accountable, our country will get more reports like the one that came out last summer, or worse, they will be silent and hope we all just forget about the phenomena. We do not need to fear these airborne and unidentified objects. They would have shown themselves to be dangerous a long time ago by now if they were a threat. Our citizens and country can handle the truth, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the remainder of my time.
Okay.
I mean, this is kind of echoed what he said on the phone home too, on the big phone home too, that the Department of Defense is not being and it kind of echoes what Manny Miranda said on the show the other day. They have a ton of more information that they're sitting on that they could be putting out that doesn't pose a threat to national security or give away any industry secrets or peeks behind the curtain. There are a lot of things that they could be more transparent with. The idea that he's calling these things a phenomena, and that if airborne objects, that if they were violent, we would have known about it a long time ago, and shouldn't be something that we fear. That's a first that I've heard from. Well, I mean, he did say that on the big phone home, but I've never heard a congressman say that on the floor in DC. Like that's history making in a sense. I don't know if this is going to be the moment of history we all come back to, but that is something that's never been done on that level, not that I can remember.
And he said the UAP report was bogus, and that was a big part of it, right? Was that we're looking into this because they're a threat, not we should look into this because they're not a threat. Like those are two really opposite, I guess, goals, right? One's like Lou Elizondo's like, we're looking into this because it might be a threat, and here he is saying these aren't a threat at all. We should just be sharing everything, right? I mean, so it's kind of
a congressman and an intelligence person might have different opinions on it because maybe somebody has more data to the contrary. But I think the reason why the threat narrative was first put into this conversation, and Lou Elizondo explained this, is if you go into your boss's office and you put on the table a report about, and you label it UFOs, the person that's getting that report is probably going to kick you out of the office with a couple of curses to back it up. Now, if you go into that same boss's office and you say, hey, we've got a national security issue with a potential threat in our sky, but we don't know what it is, now you get ears to perk up because of the stigma. You have to present it to, kind of like what Sean Cahill said on the show. If we're talking about ice cream, I want to hear about it from Ben and Jerry's. If you're talking about military aspects, I want to hear it from generals and people who know how that works. I want to hear the jargon. I want to hear it from them. And that's kind of the same thing here, where it's, they have to frame the phenomena in a way that a 4-star general is going to take seriously. So I can see why a congressman, just based off of maybe some of the limited data that he's looked at, could come to the conclusion that, well, if these things were a threat, we know about it, and I think, since the ATIP program especially lost its name, that threat, I think they heard the message loud and clear from this side of the argument. Like, stop calling it a threat. We hate that you're calling this a threat. It's putting a label on something that we don't know. You're fear mongering, and it feels like a psyop. That's where my first feelings when I started hearing about the unidentified aerial threat identification program. The first thing I thought of was like, oh, they're fearing up war. This is like drumming I heard this with the Russians in the Cold War when I was a kid. I heard this with Saddam Hussein in the early 90s. I heard it after 9/11 again. I heard it when we tried to go to war and drum up war with Iran. We still hear with Iran, with Afghanistan, terrorism, waging a war against a military tactic, which means it'll never end. The terrorism doesn't have a border. Like it's like, again, trying to catch smoke. So when I heard those things, my red flags went off too. And I think they noticed that. And I think they pivoted to unidentified aerial phenomena. I think that's why you're seeing the names of these offices being not so much from the I think from the DoD perspective, the name of their office is just to confuse, whereas the acronym for this new Astro office is friendly. Like, it's easy to understand this amendment, and it's easy to digest it and go, yeah, that's reasonable. So that's why I would say from Congressman Burchett's perspective, maybe why he's leaning to, as he doesn't believe it's a threat. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Go ahead, Rather.
It could be a threat, right? Like it's unidentified unless we know what it is. It could be a threat. And when you even
how can you not know?
I mean, maybe it's just so bizarre, and we don't have good enough evidence, right? Like, I'm not sure that we really do have the mountains of pictures and videos that everyone claims. It's kind of hard for me to believe that we have that, and no one in the government would secretly leak a great UFO picture, right? So I'm skeptical that they actually know what's going on, and it makes a lot more sense to me if we're just finally getting to the point where after 70 years of the government saying there's no there, they're finally dragging their heels and starting to admit that there's a there, and I find that awesome.
No, I think this is awesome. Like, this is a cool moment on the congressional floor. Like, this is exactly what we wanted, and this would be great if the next person who did it was Marco Rubio or Christian Gillibrand. I'm so interested to see, as soon as this bill passes, who's going to come out publicly and start talking about it, if anybody. I'm curious to know, when the mainstream media is going to pick up on it, if it does get signed into law or voted on, that leads into the president signing it at the end of the year. It's going to be very interesting. I'm dying to find out what happens with this bill.
I felt like the Pentagon office, the DoD office, I feel like that did get a lot of news coverage. I don't know if you saw that. There were a lot of attention, whereas the Gillibrand amendment, I think that should just
I think
right?
I think this is kind of where Lou Elizondo and Christopher Mellon have an issue. There's a trust issue with the DoD with this new AOI MSG office, because they're in a perfect position to undercut the conversation that should be had, and the focus in the conversation should be on the Gillibrand Amendment.
That is
not
what
this
happened.
DoD office.
So I was a little skeptical because you know how I tend to play the
Both sides.
Elizondo is planning, both sides, but that is what ended up happening. That's afterward that story made around, all the Google alerts and everything, and it literally buried the discussion of the amendment. Yeah.
But not within Congress. There's no indication at all that Christian Gillibrand or anyone in Congress is. Well, yeah, but that's irrelevant, right?
Sure.
This Astro Act is Congress's action, and there's no indication that they're swayed by whatever the DoD is putting out. And the DoD isn't really. I mean, they have to act independently from Congress. They can't just sit there and think, what will Congress might do? They have to act with the information they have, the mandate that they have from the June 25th or whatever. So it's bizarre to me that the backlash against the AOI MSG. I mean, it's clear that it's them acknowledging the UFO issue, something that they haven't been doing for 70 years. So I still don't get the pushback.
I'm starting to get it a little more, just because I can see where the media is paying attention more to, and I think that's sort of when
the bill passes and this new office takes place, I'm certain that the media is going to take up on it. Right now there's not a lot to report. There's an office that maybe will happen. There's a lot of steps that have to be done in the legislative before this becomes real. Right,
but the thing with this this AOI MSG office, it's happening. Period.
Which is good.
Stop. No,
good,
I don't know if it is. I mean, this is the same.
How could it be worse?
I'm going to wait and see before I say whether or not it's a good thing. Only because the ATIP program, and yes, we got information from the AWSAAP program, and the New York Times article, and all of this stuff kind of came from this section. But it still lacks a ton of transparency, a ton. And they've got zero commitments to you, to me, to Jane, or anybody else publicly to give us any more data on it. I think Lou Elizondo and Christopher Mellon coming out of that apparatus is a anomaly. That wasn't supposed to happen. And so now they've got a new office with a new set of things, and they're like, oh yeah, we got this. We've done this before. But yet they've kind of helped not be super transparent with this for a very long time, the DoD.
Well, I mean, let's say that the Astro doesn't pass due to whatever reason. Mm-hmm. Without the AOI MSG, the issues is pretty much dead in the water. With the AOI MSG, we have an entity.
We would still have Gallegos bill.
Okay, well, let's say that all falls flat, and that the people it doesn't pass. Without the AOI MSG, we have nothing. We have no entity, no officials who we can call before Congress and say, hey, what's happening with the UAP issue?
Well, I think
now with this office, we do.
Well, I think you're partly right. And the reason why I'm going to kind of agree with you on this is because there's a letter from Congressman Tim Burchett that I'm going to share with you guys right now. I'm going to pull it up. Here it is right here. And so this letter was written today from the office of Tim Burchett, and it is to the Honorable Ronald S. Moultrie, the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security at the Defense Pentagon. So he writes, Dear Undersecretary Moultrie, thank you for your ongoing attention to the presence of unidentified aerial phenomena in our airspace. I write today requesting increased transparency into the matter. The June 2021 preliminary assessment released by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence provided few answers and raised more questions. The American people deserve to know whether we are alone in our galaxy, so I was disappointed that the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, the UAPTF, lacked the sufficient data for an all-encompassing analysis. It is incredibly problematic that we still do not know if these UAPs are simply airborne clutter, advanced adversarial systems, or even advanced technologies not of this world. However, I am encouraged that the newly established Airborne Object Identification and Management Executive Council is transitioning. Excuse me?
Oh, I was just saying, good job. You said it all. You said the acronym correctly.
Is transitioning to the UAPTF, to the Airborne Object Identification Management Synchronization Group. It is my hope that the AOI-MSG will build off the preliminary assessment by collecting and analyzing all relevant data so we can get to the bottom of this phenomenon. So that kind of backs what you're saying, rather. I feel like this feels to me like a really good political move. He's publicly advocating for the Gillibrand Amendment. And at the same time, he's also covering his bases by saying, listen, this is a good idea. Thank you for doing this, but we need more. Like, we need more out of this office. And so therefore, I'm requesting that the AOI-MSG or the AOI-MEX-EX brief members of Congress on their findings in a classified setting, followed by public hearings before the relevant committees. Thank you for your service to the American people, and I look forward to hearing from you soon. Respectfully, Tim Burchett, member of Congress. So, on the floor, he's
a little different on the floor.
It's a little on the floor. And we were talking about this in pre-show because, look, you're on TV. There's more of a showmanship aspect to things. You can get impassioned on the floor. You can really sort of share your opinions on the floor. But when you're making requests in writing, it's super respectful and very to the point, and very thankful. When I first saw this, I was like, how can you do both? How can you call it, what were his words? God, I took the video out of here, but basically lambasting he made fun of the acronym. Like, I'm sure somebody was paid a lot of money to come up with that acronym, but then when he's here on paper, it's like, thank you so much. We truly appreciate the office, and it's a completely different tone. And so I hit up Jazz Shaw, like, what's going on here? Is this how the sausage is made? Is this a brilliant political move? And Jazz did write back. I got to pull up the tweet, but I mean, what are your initial thoughts there as I pull this up?
Yeah. I mean, I guess, what bothers me still is that, the whole Lou Elizondo and Christopher Mellon telling us that the Deputy Undersecretary Kelly Hicks is being hoodwinked and deceived by this, which is a big claim. I mean, that's almost a traitorous, seditious claim if someone is trying to hide and deceive the Deputy Secretary of Defense. And I mean, without any evidence. It just seems bizarre.
But he also followed it up with, well, that's why I left my job, because the people above him were deceiving the general above them by not giving them the information, by basically stalling it at that point. No?
Well, not trickling issues up, I think, is different than deceiving. Lou Elizondo definitely, is saying that they're being hoodwinked, and it's we go back to the discussion we had in the first hour. Does Lou Elizondo still work for the military? He is a government contractor.
So
I don't know if he's really a whistleblower, and it's just so murky and weird.
I think I feel how the difference between the letter and the floor is how I feel inside. It's like there's the side of me that's just, this DOD thing is just a sham. But I kind of felt that way about the Gillibrand Amendment, though. So going into the Gillibrand Amendment, it was this lovely detail, but it also made me nervous, especially the Transmedium office and the people who maybe lobbied for it. So I was trying to just process that, and then this other office comes into play, and so I think I feel like Senator Birch in the letter of just wanting to give everybody the benefit of the doubt, and just data's data. Who cares?
Right.
Just give me the data. I will figure out, I will make sense of it from there.
Right. Or
but-
at least trust the
yeah.
American people to try and make sense of it.
Right.
Give
I
us the
think
data
that's-
and let us decide.
I think that's kind of where I'm trying to level out, is giving up a little bit of the truth not the truth seeking there, but some of the curiosity there of trying to read people's minds and figure out their motives. Because even if all, Lou Elizondo, Christopher Mellon, or, James Carrion, who we had earlier, all these folks we talked to that we look to for guidance, I mean, even if they're completely well-intentioned, and believe everything they say, they could still be misled, or they could still be incorrect, right? Or, I mean, because something I want to remind people, what happened to the War of the Worlds national security? Why are we assuming we can handle the truth? Why are we assuming that, well, if they could have wiped us out by now, they would have already? Well, maybe it's because one of the reasons they haven't wiped us out already is because we're not trying to figure out who they are. How do we know that there's not some intelligence community that's had discussions, very serious discussions like that? So, yeah, I feel like I'm almost starting from scratch, even the more we hear, from different people. So it's confusing.
Yeah. And I'd say personally, I'd be much more pessimistic about the future and pessimistic for government disclosure, both for the Gilliland Amendment, Astro, and the other one, if not for the fact that we have the Galileo Project now. We have, academics looking at the same thing that are going to hold the government accountable. If they start finding things and the government is saying, we don't have any idea, it's going to be kind of obvious who's lying.
Yeah. I mean, look, I feel like everybody, this is where I go back to kind of what Zignal said. It's like, wow, I wish I was living in your country where we could argue about all of these offices and
Right.
proposed ideas. God, Lee, we just had a congressman today on the floor of Congress ask for public, or not. Well, he didn't ask for public hearings on the floor, but in writing, he asked for public hearings, which is exactly what we were talking about for the big phone home. We want to see public hearings. My question is, my biggest question is that if the AOI MSG is the office that we get public hearings from, are we good with that? Is like, because all we've been told is we can't trust these guys and they're undermining the process.
Right.
But at the same time, we just kind of clapped for public hearings from this office.
Yeah, and we've had no evidence to back up those claims either. And personally, I'd rather have AOI MSG with public hearings than the Astro with just the public reports. I think that we're going to get more out of public hearings if we go that route.
If we have our way, we're going to get both.
Well, I say with the Astro,
because
there's no press for public hearings with the Astro bill, though. I haven't really heard anyone say that.
No. I'm not saying no. What I'm saying is we're going to get public hearings through the AOI MSG because that office is going to get made. And if there's enough public pressure, maybe we actually get a congressional hearing through this office. And then at the same time, if the Gillibrand Amendment passes, we're also going to get a public report. So we're going to have both.
Yeah.
Like there's a good chance we get both next year, which is a good thing. That's a good thing, right? Like we're really
have our cake and eat it too.
Freaking spoiled. And I think also a lot of it is, and this just again goes back to what Red Panda Koala said on the show yesterday with Daniel Miller. If you haven't watched that episode, please go back and watch it. He's going to be doing a new video on Edgar Mitchell. I cannot wait.
Oh, sweet.
But he's saying like this feels like it's moving in slow motion for us because we're really hip to the game. But for people outside of the community, like this is going to be a huge shock to the system.
Oh yeah. Over the Thanksgiving, I was talking to some family. I was like, are you aware that they're starting an office like to investigate UFOs? They were just, and they know I'm UFO Jane, so
Right.
you know we talk, but completely had no clue,
Yeah.
right? So imagine once people start really processing this, and it's a more regular news item going into the next senator elections, I guess. So it's gonna fly.
I think so. I think it'll fly as well. I mean, like again, we're incredibly spoiled. And I think we're in a good place. Like Jazz's comment back to me was, with no comments from internal sources, I would say that this seems like a good faith effort, but not one that is likely to produce immediate productive results. And that was in reference to the letter that Tim Burchett sent to the OUSDI or ODNI, excuse me. No, right? The USDI.
Too many letters.
So many.
Let's go back
acronyms.
to hieroglyphs, please.
Yeah, seriously, hieroglyphs would be so much easier.
I do think all roads are going in the right direction, though. So I think
that's for sure. And just FYI, I put in a request for Lou. He's not going to be available till March of next year. I think he's going to be laying low. They're working on stuff, so that's all I'm going to say. But I am going to see who else we can get on the show that believes that this is an undercutting, an undermining of the new Astro office. I want to dig deep into why that narrative is being put out there. I think it's an important question, because if we do get, it would be very, very interesting if the congressional, if we get public congressional hearings out of this office. And when I say this office, I mean AOI MSG, AOI EX. Like I would be, or EXEC. I'd be shocked if that's where congressional hearings come from. Who are they going to put on the stand? How is that going to work? Who gets called to that congressional hearing?
And couldn't Astro, if Astro gets passed, influence that, right? So
possibly.
Why not?
I mean, they could recommend. I mean, there's nothing to say they couldn't recommend.
They're going to make news and data happen, right? So it's going to be a driving force, right, in all of this. So it'll make it to where, whatever. It's always going to be there, right, in the background, what they're doing, right? So yeah, I think we'll get everything. We'll get everything we want for Christmas.
I think we will too. Well, next Christmas anyway, especially.
Yeah, I guess.
Because man, that's going to be a long Christmas list for next year. God, this year. I mean, look, we just today, I think this is the last thing real quick that I'll talk about. Roy Blunt said that they're going through the amendments now and that they should have a vote on the NDAA tomorrow. And it didn't seem like it wasn't going to pass with the amendments. It seems like the biggest beef that they're held up on right now, just like Jazz said, is the Build Back Better plan, whatever, the BBB, the infrastructure plan that the Democrats are putting on the table. That's the biggest point of contention when it comes to the NDAA and whether or not it passes with the amendment. So, fingers crossed that they can find a bipartisan solution where we get the Gillibrand Amendment in there. We also get the AOI MSG office in there. We'll also have Galileo. We'll also have UAPX. We'll also have all of these wonderful different places that data could come from at any moment.
Something's going to happen, guys.
Something's going to
be plenty to talk about in the coming months.
Plenty to talk about. So make sure you subscribe, ring that bell. The show's going to be available very soon. As soon as we get out of here, I'm going to go put it on the podcast, which is available on iTunes, Spotify. Please leave us a rate and review. We had the most downloads ever in our podcast history. Definitely not podcast history, but our podcast history last month. So guys, the rate and reviews are helping with more people finding the show. So please help if you can that way. Don't forget to check out everybody's links who was on the show: James Carrion, TJ Allard, Rather Be Squidding, UFO Jane. All of their information is in the description below. We also have a merch store. Check out my link tree. You can find our Discord through there. The Discord's been popping off. It's a lot of fun. We've got a lot of really cool conversations going down in there. And yeah, tomorrow is tomorrow Thursday?
Yeah. Singularity Lab tomorrow.
Singularity Lab tomorrow, and we're going to be doing a roundtable with the whole team of the debrief. That's going to be awesome. They're just celebrating their first year anniversary. I think it was yesterday. So that'll be a really cool roundtable. And then on Friday, we've got a really big interview with John Ramirez, former CIA agent. John Ramirez. I know Rather's got a lot of questions. Mike will be here, but we're also bringing his friend in Brooks, who's just a really analytical thinker, and I appreciate his viewpoints on things. And he's also got a really good understanding of government contracting, because he also himself is a government contractor. So that'll be really, really cool. So don't forget, ring the bell. Other than that, do you guys have anything else? What are you working on this week? You want to remind people of anything?
I'm looking into how new tech might find old UFOs, so subscribe over at Rather Be Squidding to get more on that.
Jane, you've got an interview coming up, right?
Yeah, Jason McClellan, and I might get another, I won't say who, but I might get another interview into that same episodes that's coming. And if people missed my live stream with Stephen Greenstreet, I got a little clip of a little Kesha story that he had on YouTube now. You guys can check that out.
I'll definitely
tidy over.
Well, you guys, thank you so much for coming aboard, getting weird with us here on another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review, your home for credible news, reviews, and commentary on everything UAP and UFO, science, emerging tech, and futurism. My name's Luis Jimenez for Rather Be Squidding and UFO Jane Kyle. We'll see you next time. You guys stay safe out there. Peace. Where's my mouse? There it is.
Bye.
I'm going to tell y'all right now, all of these wonderful people would not be here without Patreon supporters like you. If you enjoy credible news, reviews, and commentary on UFOs and UAPs 5 days a week, you want to support this show. What's your name? Marty. Marty, look how easy this is, Marty. Pick up your phone. Boom! You're a Patreon member. I mean, look, it's so easy. You just click the link, which is right here. Just for $1 a month, you can support this show. Just fill out the information and pledge what's comfortable for you. It could be $1, $5, $10, or who knows. Just support.